Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a bunch of new stories for you to enjoy. Whether you're trying to sleep, do homework, chores, or anything really, this video will be perfect for you. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy these videos, and discuss the stories with each other in the comments. Now let's get right to the first story.
Story 1. At the airport, my wife said, "Don't walk with me. You'll embarrass me in front of my rich friends." I nodded and let her go ahead. But when she came back weeks later, her ride home wasn't me. Let me tell you about the morning that changed everything. My name is Marcus Hale, and I'm about to take you through the most spectacularly humiliating moment of my marriage, which, spoiler alert, also turned out to be the most liberating. Picture this. It's 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'm dragging 3 suitcases that could probably house a small family through the airport. And I'm wondering how the hell my wife managed to pack what looks like half of Nordstrom for a 3-week content creation trip to Europe. Now, before you start thinking I'm some kind of saint for slinging her luggage around like a pack mule, let me paint you the full picture. Sophie had been planning this trip for months. And by planning, I mean she'd been dropping not so subtle hints about needing new outfits, professional camera equipment, and inspiration funds for her influencer career. Translation: I'd been funding this European adventure to the tune of about 15 grand. Not that anyone was keeping track. Well, except me, because somebody had to pay the credit card bills. I showed up that morning in my standard airport attire. Dark jeans, a comfortable hoodie, and sneakers that had seen better days but were broken in just right. Look, I'm not trying to impress anyone at 5:30 in the morning. Especially not the TSA agents who look like they'd rather be literally anywhere else on earth. I figured I'd drop Sophie off, grab some coffee, maybe hit the gym on my way home. Simple, straightforward, no drama. But then Sophie's traveling companions arrived, and suddenly I felt like I'd wandered onto the set of some reality show about rich housewives. Clara and Vivon swept in like they were walking a red carpet instead of navigating the departure zone at LAX. Clara was sporting what I'm pretty sure was a designer outfit that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, complete with sunglasses that probably had their own insurance policy. Vivon wasn't far behind, clicking across the pavement in heels that looked like they could double as weapons, dragging a suitcase that screamed, "I have more money than sense." Now, I've met these women before at Sophie's little get-togethers. And let me tell you, they have a special talent for making you feel like you're about 2 tax brackets below their notice. They do this thing where they smile at you with their mouths, but their eyes are calculating your net worth and finding it sadly lacking. It's like being evaluated by a pair of well-dressed vultures. The moment Clara and Vivon laid eyes on me, I could practically see the gears turning. Here I was, Sophie's husband, looking like I just rolled out of bed to do manual labor, standing next to their friend who was about to embark on this fabulous European adventure. The looks they exchanged, man, if looks could kill, I'd have been a dead man walking. But the real kicker wasn't their barely concealed disdain. I'd dealt with that before, chalked it up to their snobbery, and moved on with my life. No, the moment that's burned into my brain like a brand happened when Sophie caught sight of her friend's reactions. I watched her face change in real time, saw the exact second she registered their disapproval, and decided to distance herself from the source of their judgment. Me, her husband, the guy who'd been supporting her dreams, funding her lifestyle, and hauling her oversized luggage through an airport at dawn. She stepped closer to me and for a split second I thought she was going to introduce me properly, maybe say something nice about how I'd driven her to the airport or helped organize her trip. Instead, she leaned in close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume, the stuff I bought her for Christmas, and whispered 6 words that hit me like a punch to the gut. "Don't walk with me. You'll embarrass me." Let me repeat that because I want to make sure you caught the full impact. My wife, the woman I'd been married to for 4 years, the person I'd been supporting emotionally and financially while she chased her influencer dreams, told me not to walk with her because I would embarrass her in front of her rich friends. Not, "Thanks for the ride, honey," or "I'll miss you or even see you in 3 weeks. Just a cold, calculated dismissal designed to preserve her image with 2 women who probably wouldn't remember my name if their lives depended on it. Now, I could have made a scene. I could have raised my voice, demanded an explanation, maybe even given Clara and Vivian a piece of my mind about their judgment and attitude. I could have reminded Sophie right there in front of her precious friends about all the ways I'd been supporting her, all the sacrifices I'd made, all the times I'd bitten my tongue when she prioritized her image over our relationship. But you know what I did instead? I looked at her for a long moment. Really looked at her and I saw something I'd been trying to ignore for months. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a case of nerves about traveling with her intimidating friends. This was who Sophie really was when push came to shove. This was her true priority system laid bare. Image first, everything else a distant second. So, I let go of her luggage cart. Just opened my hands and let it roll away from me. I nodded once. The kind of calm, measured nod you give when you've just made an important decision. And I turned around and walked away. No argument, no dramatic declaration, no tearful goodbye. I just left her standing there with her designer friends and her overpacked suitcases and her carefully constructed image. As I walked back toward the parking structure, I could hear Sophie calling my name, but her voice had that sharp edge of panic that told me she was starting to realize she might have overplayed her hand. Too little, too late, sweetheart. I'd spent 4 years being the reliable, supportive husband who showed up when needed and faded into the background when convenient. I'd been her safety net, her financial backing, her emotional support system, and apparently her embarrassment. The drive home was the quietest 45 minutes of my life, and not because I was devastated or heartbroken. I was calm in a way I hadn't felt in years, like I'd finally stopped carrying a weight I didn't realize had been crushing me. Sophie thought she'd be coming home in 3 weeks to the same old Marcus, the guy who'd take whatever scraps of respect she threw his way and be grateful for them. She had absolutely no idea that her life, our life, was about to be completely rewritten. And for the first time in a very long time, I was looking forward to being the one holding the pen. You know what's funny about life-changing moments? Everyone expects them to come with dramatic music and slow-motion sequences like some kind of Hollywood breakdown scene. But the drive home from LAX that morning was the complete opposite of chaos. It was the clearest my head had been in years. While other drivers were losing their minds in typical LA traffic, honking and weaving like maniacs, I was cruising in the right lane, windows down, actually enjoying the 45 minutes it took to get back to our house in Manhattan Beach. The thing is, I wasn't plotting revenge or rehearsing angry speeches in my head. That's what Sophie would expect because that's how her drama-filled brain works. She probably figured I'd spend the next 3 weeks stewing in my hurt feelings. Maybe calling her friends to complain. Definitely waiting by the phone for her to throw me some breadcrumb apology from Paris or Rome. Classic Marcus behavior, right? The reliable guy who always forgives and forgets because he's too nice to rock the boat. But here's what Sophie never understood about me. I'm not nice. I'm strategic. There's a difference. Nice guys let people walk all over them and then wonder why they're always getting screwed. Strategic guys. We take notes. We remember every slight, every dismissal, every moment when someone shows us exactly who they are and then we act accordingly. See, while I was hauling her luggage through that airport, getting dismissed like the hired help, my brain was already 3 steps ahead. Sophie thought she was married to some pushover who'd built his whole identity around making her happy. What she actually married was a guy who'd spent 6 years in the army before college. Learned how to think under pressure and knew the difference between a tactical retreat and surrender. The SUV she loved so much. That gleaming black Escalade she used for all her Instagram photos. The one that made her feel like a celebrity when she pulled up to those fancy Beverly Hills brunches with Clara and Vivian. That baby was titled in my name only. Bought and paid for with my money, my credit, my signature on the paperwork. Sophie always assumed joint ownership because, well, we were married and she drove it more than I did. But assumption is the mother of all screw-ups, and Sophie was about to get a master class in the difference between assumption and reality. I pulled into our driveway, or rather my driveway, since the house was also in my name, thanks to an inheritance from my grandfather, and sat there for a minute, engine running, looking at the place we'd called home for the past 2 years. Sophie had spent months decorating it with her aesthetic, turning every room into a backdrop for her social media content. The living room looked like a furniture showroom, all white and beige and completely impractical. The kitchen had more camera equipment than cooking supplies. Even our bedroom had special lighting installed so she could film her morning routines. It hit me then that I'd been living in a movie set, not a home. Every decision about paint, colors, furniture, decor, all of it filtered through the lens of how will this look online. I couldn't remember the last time we'd chosen something because we actually liked it because it made us comfortable. Because it reflected who we were as people instead of who Sophie wanted her followers to think we were. But that was about to change because Marcus 2.0 was about to make his debut. And this version of me had zero patience for Sophie's carefully curated. I grabbed my phone and started making calls. First stop, the Cadillac dealership where I'd bought the Escalade 18 months ago. You'd be amazed how cooperative car dealers get when you mention you're thinking about selling back a low-mileage luxury vehicle. Within 20 minutes, I had an appointment for that afternoon and a rough estimate that made me smile. Sophie's precious status symbol was about to become a very nice check with my name on it. While I was on a roll, I called my buddy Jake who works in real estate. Not because I was thinking about selling the house. Hell no. I love that house. Or at least I loved what it could become once I stripped away all of Sophie's Instagram-friendly nonsense. But Jake knows everyone in town, including the best junk removal services. The kind of guys who can clear out a house fast and don't ask too many questions about why you need 3 rooms worth of designer clothes and makeup removed ASAP. Let me guess, Jake said when I explained what I needed. Sophie finally pushed you too far. Something like that. I told him, can you hook me up with someone reliable? I'm talking full service. Everything that isn't nailed down and doesn't belong to me. Gone by tomorrow. Damn, brother. I've been waiting for this call for 2 years. Yeah, I got a guy. Tommy's crew will take care of you. And they're discreet. Cash only, though. Not a problem. The beautiful thing about having a plan is how it simplifies everything else. While Sophie was probably boarding her first-class flight to London, posting selfies about how excited she was for her European adventure, I was systematically dismantling the foundation of her comfortable little world. And the best part, I was doing it all completely legally, using only resources that belonged to me in the first place. The Escalade sale went smoother than I expected. Turns out luxury SUVs hold their value pretty well when they've been garage kept and babied by someone who only drove them to yoga classes and brunch spots. The dealer cut me a check for 38 grand, which was about 6,000 less than I'd paid, but still enough to make Sophie's head spin when she found out. I deposited the money in my personal account, the one she didn't have access to, and felt a deep satisfaction I hadn't experienced in months. On the drive home in my old pickup truck, the one Sophie always complained was too blue-collar for her image, I started thinking about what came next. This wasn't just about revenge, though. I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. This was about reclaiming my life from someone who'd been systematically erasing me from it. Sophie wanted to be embarrassed by me. Fine, she could be embarrassed from a distance while I rebuilt everything she tried to change about who I was. By the time I pulled back into my driveway, the sun was setting and I felt more like myself than I had in years. Tomorrow, Tommy's crew would arrive and start clearing out 4 years' worth of Sophie stuff. The day after that, I'd start turning our house back into my home. And in 3 weeks, when Sophie's European vacation ended, and she expected to find me waiting with open arms and a full bank account, she'd discover that some bridges, once burned, don't get rebuilt. Phase 1 was complete. Sophie's precious SUV was gone, converted into cold, hard cash that would fund whatever came next. She taught me an important lesson that morning at the airport. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones most willing to throw you under the bus to protect their image. Lucky for me, I'm a fast learner. Waking up in my own house the next morning felt like opening my eyes in someone else's life. Everywhere I looked, Sophie's presence screamed at me from every corner, every surface, every carefully curated inch of what used to be our home. The massive walk-in closet that looked like a Saks Fifth Avenue explosion with designer dresses still bearing tags from impulse purchases she'd made for content. The bathroom counter that resembled a Sephora stock room covered in skincare serums and makeup palettes that cost more than most people's rent. The guest room that had been completely transformed into her filming studio, complete with professional lighting rigs, camera equipment, and a backdrop wall sheet had custom painted in what she called millennial pink, but I called Pepto-Bismol nightmare for years of marriage. And somehow Sophie had managed to colonize every square foot of my grandfather's house with her brand. Even the kitchen, for crying out loud, had been redesigned around her morning routine videos. Special lighting installed above the island, a collection of aesthetically pleasing but completely useless appliances arranged for maximum visual impact, and a coffee station that looked like it belonged in a boutique cafe rather than a place where people actually lived. But here's the thing about military training that most people don't understand. It teaches you to see problems as logistics exercises, and Sophie's stuff that was just a logistics problem waiting for the right solution. Tommy's crew showed up at 8 a.m. sharp. 3 guys in matching uniforms driving a truck that could have hauled a small apartment. The crew chief, a no-nonsense guy with graying temples and arms like tree trunks, took one look around the house and let out a low whistle. "Damn, buddy. Your wife really went all out, didn't she?" "Ex-wife," I corrected, even though the paperwork wasn't filed yet. "And yeah, she had expensive taste. Lucky for you, most of it's barely been used." Tommy walked through each room with me, taking notes on his clipboard while I pointed out what stayed and what went. It was actually pretty simple. If I'd bought it, chosen it, or inherited it from my family, it stayed. Everything else was fair game. The distinction was clearer than I'd expected. Probably because Sophie and I had such different ideas about what made a house feel like home. "What about this stuff?" Tommy asked, gesturing to the filming equipment in the guest room. "Some of this gear looks pretty high-end." "All of it goes," I said. "The cameras, the lights, the backdrop, that ridiculous pink chair she bought for her talking head videos. I want this room completely empty." "You sure about that? Some of this equipment's worth serious money. You could probably sell it yourself, make a decent profit." I thought about it for maybe half a second. Yeah, I could have spent weeks dealing with online listings, meeting potential buyers, negotiating prices, but that would mean thinking about Sophie's career, her content, her brand for hours every day. That would mean staying connected to the life she'd built using my money and my support. No, thanks. Take it all, I told him. Whatever you guys can't use, donate it or dump it. I just want it gone. While Tommy's crew got to work, I tackled the digital side of Sophie's empire. See, here's something she never knew about me. I actually understand technology pretty well. Those years in the army included some time working with communication systems, which translated surprisingly well to civilian IT work. Sophie always treated me like I was some kind of caveman when it came to computers. But that was just another way she'd underestimated me. I started with the easy stuff, changing passwords on all the accounts that were actually mine, but that she'd been using. Our joint banking accounts, the credit cards, the streaming services, even the Wi-Fi network. Sophie was about to discover that her comfortable digital life had been built on infrastructure she didn't control and couldn't access without me. But the real masterstroke was her website. Sophie's influencer career depended on her carefully maintained online presence. And the crown jewel was her personal website, the hub where she directed followers from Instagram and TikTok, where brands could find her contact information and portfolio, where she sold her courses and affiliate links. What she didn't know was that the hosting account, the domain registration, and the admin access were all tied to my email address because I'd been the one to set it up for her 2 years ago. I didn't delete anything. That would have been too obvious, too petty. Instead, I changed the admin password and quietly took control of the back end. For now, everything looked normal from the outside, but I was sitting on a digital nuclear option that could vaporize her online presence with a few clicks whenever I decided the time was right. The physical clearing of the house took most of the day, and it was weirdly therapeutic to watch 4 years of accumulated Sophie disappear into Tommy's truck. Her closet full of designer clothes that she bought for Instagram posts and then never wore again. Gone. The collection of expensive handbags she rotated through like some kind of fashion conveyor belt. Gone. The mountains of skincare products she'd accumulated from brand partnerships and PR packages. Gone. Even the furniture she'd insisted we buy to match her aesthetic. The uncomfortable white couches that looked great in photos but felt like sitting on cardboard. All of it loaded up and hauled away. By the time Tommy and his crew finished, the house felt like it had been holding its breath for years and could finally exhale. The spaces were empty, but not hollow. They were clean slates waiting for me to decide what came next. The guest room, stripped of its filming equipment and pink backdrop, revealed windows I'd forgotten existed and hardwood floors that had been hidden under Sophie's equipment for so long they looked brand new. "You want a receipt for all this?" Tommy asked as his crew loaded the last of Sophie's exercise equipment, a Peloton bike she'd used maybe 6 times, into the truck. "Absolutely," I said. Something told me I was going to want documentation of exactly what had been removed and when. As the truck pulled away, I stood in my driveway looking at a house that was finally mine again. Empty rooms, quiet spaces, no ring lights or camera equipment, or strategically placed props designed to create the illusion of a perfect life. For the first time in years, I could walk through my own home without feeling like I was trespassing on someone else's movie set. Sophie was probably in London by now, posting stories about her 5-star hotel room and expensive dinners. She had no idea that back home, her carefully constructed world was being systematically dismantled by the husband she'd dismissed as an embarrassment. Tomorrow, I'd start rebuilding. Tonight, I was just going to enjoy the silence. Walking back into that house after selling Sophie's precious SUV felt like entering enemy territory. Every corner, every room, every damn surface screamed her name louder than a teenager at a buoyant concert. It was like living inside her Instagram feed. All carefully arranged props and staged moments. Nothing real or authentic about any of it. The living room looked like a furniture catalog threw up all over my space with throw pillows arranged in geometric patterns that nobody was actually allowed to disturb because they might mess up the aesthetic. The master bedroom was basically a film studio disguised as a place where people sleep. Ring lights positioned at strategic angles. A whole setup for her morning routine videos where she'd pretend to wake up naturally while wearing full makeup. The bathroom looked like Sephora had exploded. Skincare products covering every inch of counter space, most of them half-used and abandoned when she moved on to the next miracle serum her influencer friends were pushing. And don't even get me started on the walk-in closet that had become Sophie's personal Nordstrom, packed with designer clothes that still had tags on them because she bought them for specific posts and then forgot they existed. But the guest room, man, that was the real kicker. What used to be my workshop, the place where I'd built furniture and worked on projects that actually meant something to me, had been completely transformed into Sophie's content creation headquarters. Professional cameras, lighting equipment, a whole backdrop system for different moods, and enough ring lights to illuminate a small stadium. She'd shoved all my tools and half-finished projects into the garage, claiming she needed the space for her business. Looking at it all that morning, I realized I'd been living in someone else's fantasy for way too long. This wasn't our home. It was Sophie's stage set, and I was just the unpaid maintenance crew keeping the lights on and the bills paid. Time for some renovations. I called Tommy's crew first thing, and let me tell you, these guys were exactly what Jake had promised. Efficient, professional, and completely uninterested in the drama behind why someone would want to clear out half a house in 24 hours. Tommy himself showed up around noon to do the walkthrough. A guy in his 50s who looked like he'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed by any of it. "So, what are we talking about here?" he asked, surveying the living room with the practiced eye of someone who dealt with plenty of domestic situations gone sideways. "Everything that's not mine," I told him. "Clothes, makeup, all that filming equipment, furniture that screams, 'Look at me. I'm expensive.' Basically, anything that wouldn't be here if I lived alone." Tommy nodded, making notes on his clipboard. "What about stuff that might be worth something? Designer bags, jewelry, electronics. Box it up separately and put it in storage. I'll get her the address later." See, I'm not a complete bastard. I wasn't going to throw her Louis Vuitton collection in a dumpster, much as the idea had its appeal. But I also wasn't going to keep living in a museum dedicated to her vanity and the furniture. I looked around at the white leather sectional that cost more than my truck, the glass coffee table that was completely useless for actually putting coffee on, the decorative chair that looked like modern art, but was about as comfortable as sitting on a pile of rocks. Donate what's in good shape. Dump the rest. I want this place to look like a normal human being lives here, not like a magazine shoot gone wrong. Double rate for 24-hour turnaround. Worth every penny. While Tommy's crew started strategically dismantling Sophie's carefully curated world, I tackled the digital side of things. This was where my years in the army came in handy. When you're trained in logistics and systems, you learn to think about the connections between things, the dependencies that people don't always see. Sophie's whole influencer empire ran on accounts and platforms that she'd never bothered to secure properly. See, when you're married to someone and you trust them completely, you tend to use their information for backup recovery options. Email addresses, phone numbers, security questions. Sophie had been sloppy about keeping our digital lives separate because she never imagined a scenario where that might matter. First stop, all our joint accounts, checking, savings, credit cards, anything with both our names on it got locked down faster than a military base during a security breach. I changed passwords, removed her access, and set up new accounts that only I controlled. Not stealing her money, mind you, just making sure she couldn't drain our joint resources while she was living it up in Europe on my dime. Then came the fun part, her precious website and social media empire. Sophie had built her whole brand around being this aspirational lifestyle guru, posting about her perfect marriage, her beautiful home, her enviable life. What she'd forgotten was that I'd helped set up most of her technical infrastructure, including being listed as the administrator on her main website, not out of any grand plan, just because I was handy with computers, and she couldn't be bothered to learn how domain registration worked. Now, I didn't delete anything that would be too obvious and probably illegal. But I became what you might call a silent partner in Sophie's brand management. Every post, every update, every carefully staged photo would now have to go through systems I controlled. I wasn't planning to sabotage her immediately. That would be too easy and not nearly satisfying enough. No, I was playing a longer game here. By evening, Tommy's crew had worked some kind of magic. The house was unrecognizable, stripped of all Sophie's Instagram-ready nonsense and reduced to the basic furniture and belongings that were actually mine. The guest room was empty and echoing. Ready to become my workshop again. The bathroom looked like a normal human being used it instead of a beauty YouTuber. The bedroom had actual function again instead of being a broadcast studio. Standing in the living room at sunset, looking at walls that weren't covered in Sophie's motivational quotes and surfaces that weren't cluttered with her ring lights and camera equipment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. This was my space again, ready to be shaped by what I actually wanted instead of what would photograph well for social media. The house felt bigger somehow, like removing all of Sophie's stuff had given me room to breathe again. Tomorrow, I'd start the fun part, turning this empty canvas back into a home that reflected who I actually was instead of who Sophie needed me to be for her brand. Phase 2 complete. Sophie's physical presence had been surgically removed from my life with the precision of a military operation. In 3 weeks, she'd come home expecting to find everything exactly as she'd left it. She was going to be very, very disappointed. Waking up in an empty house should have felt depressing. But honestly, it was like Christmas morning for my soul. No ring lights glaring at me from 3 different angles. No camera equipment cluttering up every surface. No carefully arranged throw pillows that I wasn't allowed to actually throw anywhere. Just space, beautiful, functional mine again, space that I could fill with things that actually mattered to me instead of props for Sophie's endless content creation circus. The first thing I did was head straight to the garage where all my real stuff had been banished like some kind of furniture refugee camp. You know what I found buried under a tarp behind Sophie's bike that she'd ridden exactly twice for Instagram photos? My oak coffee table, the one I'd built with my own hands 3 years ago from reclaimed what I'd salvaged from an old barn outside Bakersfield. Sophie had hated that table with the passion of 1,000 suns because it didn't fit her aesthetic. Too rustic, too handmade, too much personality. She'd made me replace it with some glass monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a dentist's waiting room and cost more than most people's monthly rent. Hauling the oak table back into the living room felt like reuniting with an old friend. I ran my hands over the surface, checking for damage, but the wood had held up beautifully. This table had character grain patterns that told a story, small imperfections that proved it was made by human hands instead of stamped out in some factory. You could actually put things on it without Sophie shrieking about water rings or scratches. Revolutionary concept, right? Next came the fun part. Furniture shopping for someone who actually planned to live in his house instead of just filming in it. I hit up a local place in Rundo Beach that specialized in real furniture for real people. Comfortable couches you could nap on, coffee tables that could handle a beer and a pizza box. Chairs that prioritized sitting over looking pretty in photos. The sales guy, Steve, was probably wondering why I seemed so excited about buying a sectional that was designed for comfort instead of aesthetics, but I didn't care. After years of living in Sophie's magazine spread, I was ready for furniture that served a purpose beyond looking good in selfies. The new couch was this amazing deep brown leather thing that actually invited you to sit down and stay a while. None of that white leather nonsense that showed every speck of dust and made you afraid to exist in your own living room. This was a couch for watching football, taking naps, and maybe even eating takeout without having to worry about dropping sauce on something that cost more than a car payment. While I was at it, I picked up a sound system that could actually handle music instead of just serving as a backdrop for Sophie's morning routine videos. I'm talking about speakers that could make you feel the bass line in your chest. The kind of setup that turns your living room into your own personal concert hall. Sophie had always complained that real music was too distracting when she was filming, so we'd been stuck with whatever ambient noise played well for her content. Screw that noise. Literally, the transformation was happening fast. But the real magic happened when Logan showed up around 6 with a cooler full of beer and a grin that could power the entire city of Los Angeles. Logan had been my best friend since college. The kind of guy who'd tell you the truth even when you didn't want to hear it, especially about your wife, who clearly didn't deserve you. He'd been biting his tongue about Sophie for years. But I could see in his face that those days were officially over. "Holy Marcus," he said, walking into the living room and doing a slow 360 to take in all the changes. "It's like someone lifted a curse off this place. I can actually breathe in here now." "Tell me about it," I said, cracking open a beer and settling into my new couch. "Want to know the crazy part? I forgot what it felt like to be comfortable in my own house." Logan plopped down next to me, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about someone yelling at us for messing up the carefully arranged cushions. "Dude, I've been waiting for this conversation for so long. Sophie was using you like a human ATM machine, and you were too nice to see it. I saw it. I admit it. I just thought it would get better. Thought maybe if I supported her dreams long enough, she'd remember that I had dreams, too." And now I looked around at my reclaimed living room. My oak table gleaming in the late afternoon sun. My comfortable couch that didn't look like it belonged in a museum. My sound system that could actually handle some decent music. Now I remember what it's like to live for myself instead of someone else's Instagram feed. We spent the evening like we used to back in college, just hanging out and talking without every conversation being interrupted by Sophie's need to document our lives for social media. No ring lights, no carefully staged moments, no pressure to look perfect for an invisible audience. Just two friends, cold beer, and the kind of easy conversation that happens when you're not performing for anyone. "So, what's the plan when she gets back?" Logan asked around midnight after we'd properly christened the new sound system with everything from classic rock to some jazz fusion that would have made Sophie's content creation brain hemorrhage. Honestly, I'm curious to see how long it takes her to figure out that her old life isn't waiting for her anymore. I said she wanted freedom from being embarrassed by me. I'm just making sure she gets all the freedom she can handle. Logan raised his beer in a toast. "To freedom then, and to finally getting your house back." "To getting my life back," I corrected. As Logan headed home and I settled into my new couch for what would be the first real night of sleep I'd had in years, I realized something important. I wasn't just reclaiming my space. I was reclaiming myself. The Marcus who built furniture with his hands, who valued comfort over appearances, who chose substance over style. He'd been buried under 4 years of Sophie's relentless image management. But he wasn't gone. He was just waiting for his chance to rebuild. Tomorrow, I'd continue the transformation, maybe tackle the bedroom or start setting up my workshop again. But tonight, I was just going to enjoy sitting in my own living room, drinking my own beer, listening to my own music without anyone telling me it wasn't photogenic enough. For the first time in years, my house felt like home. You know what's liberating about not having to document every moment of your existence for social media? You actually get to live those moments instead of performing them. While Sophie was busy curating her European adventure for her followers, posting carefully filtered shots of croissants and museum selfies, I was rediscovering what it meant to have experiences that existed purely for their own sake. No ring lights required. The first weekend after Operation House Reclamation, Logan dragged me out to Griffith Park for a hike I'd been putting off for months. Not because I didn't want to go, but because Sophie always had some reason why weekends needed to be spent on her content calendar instead of actual living. We need to film 3 weeks worth of posts, or Clara and Vivian are doing a collaboration and I need to match their aesthetic or my personal favorite. Hiking isn't really on brand for my lifestyle content. Translation: getting sweaty and dirty didn't photograph well for someone trying to sell the fantasy of effortless perfection. But there I was, lacing up my actual hiking boots, not the designer ones Sophie had bought me for a single Instagram post about adventure couple goals, and heading up the trail with Logan like we used to do every weekend before my life became a supporting role in someone else's carefully scripted show. The morning air was crisp. The trail was challenging enough to make me work for it. And best of all, nobody was stopping every 50 yards to find the perfect lighting for a selfie. "This is weird," Logan said about halfway up, pausing to catch his breath at an overlook that gave us a killer view of the city sprawled out below. "What's weird? You're not checking your phone every 5 minutes to see if Sophie needs something, or worrying about getting home by a certain time so she can film her evening routine, or any of that stuff. You're just here." He was right. For the first time in years, I was completely present in a moment instead of mentally managing someone else's schedule and emotional needs. No text messages from Sophie asking me to pick up specific lighting equipment. No last-minute changes to dinner plans because she needed to film a sponsored post about some meal kit service. No pressure to look happy and supportive while she turned our entire life into content for strangers on the internet. After the hike, we grabbed beers at this dive bar in Los Feliz that Sophie would have hated. Too dark for good photos, too authentic for her aesthetic, too much actual character instead of the sanitized perfection she preferred. The kind of place where people went to drink beer and talk to their friends instead of staging elaborate social media moments. Logan and I sat at the bar, ordered whatever was on tap, and spent 3 hours just talking about stuff that mattered to us. Work projects, future plans, that fishing trip we've been talking about for 2 years but never took because Sophie always had some event or collaboration that needed my attention. The crazy part was how good it felt to have conversations that weren't being recorded, weren't going to be dissected later for content possibilities, weren't going to be interrupted by Sophie's need to document everything for her followers. We talked about Logan's promotion at work, my ideas for expanding my carpentry side business, whether the Dodgers had any shot at making the playoffs this year. Normal human conversations that existed purely because we enjoyed each other's company. My phone buzzed a few times with notifications, and I glanced down to see the usual parade of Sophie's European documentation. A perfectly composed shot of her coffee and pastry at some Parisian cafe captioned with something about finding inspiration in the simple moments. Another post from Rome, her and Clara and Vivon posed in front of the Colosseum, all of them wearing coordinated outfits that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Tagged with #living_life and #blessed and a dozen other hashtags designed to make her followers feel like their own lives were inadequate by comparison. The thing that struck me wasn't jealousy or hurt feelings. It was how utterly hollow it all looked. Every photo was so carefully staged, so perfectly lit, so desperately crafted to project an image of happiness and success that it felt completely disconnected from any actual experience. Were they having fun, or were they just working really hard to make it look like they were having fun? When do you cross the line from living your life to performing it for an audience that doesn't actually care about you as a person? And not once, not in a single post, story, or caption. Did Sophie mention missing me or wishing I was there? No. Wish my husband could see this beautiful sunset, or can't wait to share these memories with Marcus when I get home. Nothing. It was like I'd been completely edited out of her narrative, which, let's be honest, was probably exactly what she wanted. I was the unsexy reality behind her glamorous image. The guy who paid the bills and handled the logistics while she focused on looking fabulous for strangers on the internet. The following week, I did something I hadn't done in years. I rejoined my old softball league. These were guys I used to play with every Thursday night until Sophie started scheduling her content creation around my free time. Can't you miss one game? I need you to help me set up for this sponsored post became. Do you really need to play softball when we could be doing something together? Which eventually became me just quietly dropping out because it was easier than dealing with the guilt trips and manipulation. But Marcus 2.00 wasn't interested in managing anyone else's emotional needs at the expense of his own happiness. I showed up to practice on a Thursday evening with my old glove and a cooler full of beer, and it was like no time had passed at all. Same guys, same jokes, same pure joy of playing a game for no reason other than it was fun. No cameras, no performance, no content creation opportunities, just a bunch of middle-aged dudes pretending we were still 22 and could turn a double play without throwing out our backs. After the game, we hit up our usual spot for wings and more beer, and I found myself laughing harder than I had in months. Real laughter, not the careful camera-ready chuckles I'd gotten used to producing whenever Sophie needed me to look happy and supportive in her content. This was the deep belly-shaking kind of laughter that comes from genuine connection and shared experiences that don't need to be documented to be meaningful. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing with Sophie's updates from across the ocean: designer shopping in Milan, wine tasting in Tuscany, art museum visits in Amsterdam. Every experience filtered through the lens of how it would play to her audience. Every moment carefully crafted to maintain her brand as someone living an enviable life. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Sophie was working overtime to create the appearance of happiness for people she'd never meet, while I was actually living it with people who cared about me as a human being instead of a content creation assistant. Real life, it turns out, doesn't need good lighting or perfect angles. It just needs to be lived. The night before Sophie's scheduled return, I sat in my reclaimed living room with a beer in one hand and my laptop balanced on the oak coffee table I'd built. The one that was finally back where it belonged. Outside, the Pacific breeze was doing its thing, carrying the smell of salt water through the windows I could actually open now that I didn't have to worry about messing up Sophie's carefully controlled lighting setup. For 3 weeks, I'd been living like a human being instead of a supporting actor in someone else's Instagram story. And let me tell you, the difference was life-changing. But now, it was time for the final act of this little drama. And I wanted to get the tone just right. See, I could have gone the dramatic route, changed the locks, and left her standing on the porch with her overpriced luggage. Maybe thrown in some kind of movie-worthy confrontation for maximum impact. But that's what Sophie would expect because that's the kind of messy emotional theater she thrived on. Drama equals content and content equals attention. And attention was Sophie's drug of choice. No, Marcus 2.0 was going for something much more devastating. Complete professionalism. Cold surgical precision that would cut deeper than any screaming match or thrown dishes. I wanted her to understand exactly what had happened and why without giving her any ammunition for her inevitable victim narrative. This needed to be airtight, legally sound, and utterly final. I opened a new email and started typing. Subject: important information regarding your return. Already, I could picture her reading that subject line and feeling the first flutter of unease. Sophie was expecting "can't wait to see you" or "welcome home baby" or some other supportive husband instead. She was getting the kind of formal communication you'd send to a business partner you were severing ties with. Sophie, I began because I wasn't going to pretend this was still a loving relationship where pet names applied. I hope your trip provided the clarity and perspective you were seeking. I'm writing to inform you of several important changes that have occurred during your absence. The beauty of formal language is how it strips away all the emotional manipulation and gets straight to the facts. No room for misinterpretation. No wiggle room for her to twist my words into something that made her the victim of this story. Your personal belongings have been carefully packed and moved to a climate-controlled storage unit at Safekeep Storage, 1247 Highland Avenue, Manhattan Beach, Unit 47B. The first month has been paid in advance. You'll receive the access code and key from the facility manager during regular business hours. I took a sip of beer and smiled, imagining her face when she read that line. Sophie probably expected to walk back into the house and find everything exactly as she'd left it, like her life was some kind of TV show that got paused while she was away. The idea that actions might have consequences was probably going to come as a genuine shock to her system. The 2023 Cadillac Escalade has been sold back to the dealership as it was titled solely in my name. The proceeds have been deposited into my personal account to offset the expenses incurred during your European vacation. That line was going to sting, and I'm not ashamed to admit I enjoyed writing it. For too long, Sophie had operated under the assumption that my money was our money while her money was her money. Time for a little reality check about how property ownership actually works in the real world. The locks on the house have been changed for security purposes. As the sole owner of the property, I have decided that our living arrangement is no longer sustainable. Short, sweet, and legally bulletproof. I wasn't kicking her out of our house. I was informing a house guest that their invitation had expired. There's a difference, and that difference was about to become very important if Sophie decided to lawyer up. I understand this may come as a surprise, but I believe your request at the airport that I not walk with you to avoid embarrassment was actually excellent advice. I have decided to take it to its logical conclusion by stepping out of your life entirely. This was the part one was most proud of because it used her own words against her in a way that was both devastating and completely fair. Sophie had made it crystal clear that my presence in her life was a liability to her image. Well, congratulations, sweetheart. Problem solved. You expressed concern about being embarrassed by your association with me. I respect that concern and am taking steps to ensure it never happens again. Consider this my gift to you. The freedom to live your life without the burden of explaining my existence to your social circle. I could practically hear her brain short-circuiting as she read that paragraph. Sophie's whole manipulation strategy depended on me being the understanding, forgiving husband who absorbed her cruelty and came back for more. She'd never encountered a version of me that simply agreed with her assessment and acted accordingly. Please coordinate any future communication through our respective attorneys. I'm sure you understand the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries during this transition. The lawyer mentioned was pure psychological warfare, and I knew it would hit her exactly where it hurt most, her wallet. Sophie had gotten very comfortable spending money she hadn't earned, but hiring legal representation would require resources she didn't actually have access to anymore. Her parents might bail her out, but that would require explaining to Richard and Helen exactly how their daughter had managed to nuke a perfectly stable marriage for the sake of Instagram clout. I wish you success in all your future endeavors. Your influencer career should benefit significantly from no longer being associated with someone who doesn't fit your aesthetic. And there it was, the kill shot delivered with surgical precision. I wasn't angry or hurt or seeking revenge. I was simply a businessman closing out an unprofitable partnership and moving on to better opportunities. The fact that this approach would drive Sophie absolutely insane was just a pleasant bonus. I read through the email one more time, checking for typos and making sure the tone stayed consistently professional. This wasn't a love letter or a breakup note or a plea for reconciliation. This was a termination notice, and I wanted it to read like one. Best regards, Marcus Hale. Not love, not your husband, not even sincerely, just my name. Like I was signing off on a business transaction because that's essentially what this had become. The dissolution of a partnership where one party had been contributing everything and the other had been taking it all for granted. I hit send at 11:47 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. By the time Sophie's plane touched down at LAX the next morning, she'd have 12 hours to process the new reality of her situation. Then I closed the laptop, finished my beer, and headed upstairs to pack for my own trip. The Rocky Mountains were calling, and for the first time in years, I was free to answer. Picture this. I'm somewhere in the middle of Colorado, cruising through mountain passes on my Harley with nothing but open road ahead of me and 3 bars of cell service when I decide to power up my phone for the first time in 5 days. Big mistake. Or maybe the best decision I'd made all week, depending on how you look at entertainment value. My phone damn near exploded with notifications. We're talking biblical plague levels of missed calls, voicemails, text messages, and what appeared to be a complete social media meltdown spanning multiple platforms. The notification count looked like a slot machine jackpot. 347 missed calls, 89 voicemails, and enough text messages to fill a small novel. All from Sophie, with a supporting cast of her flying monkeys chiming in with their own brand of outrage and disbelief. But the real comedy gold came when Logan called me back. I'd reached out to him that morning because, let's be honest, I needed to know how the homecoming had gone down. Logan didn't disappoint. Dude had front row seats to what he was already calling the meltdown of the century, and he was more than happy to give me the play-by-play. Bro, you should have seen this shit, Logan said. And I could hear him trying not to laugh. I was washing my car in the driveway when the cab pulled up to your house around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Sophie gets out looking like she just stepped off the cover of some travel magazine. You know, designer everything, perfect hair, the whole Instagram princess routine. She's got enough luggage for a small army, and she's clearly expecting her grand entrance to go smoothly. I pulled over at a scenic overlook and settled in for what I knew was going to be the story of the year. Tell me she at least tried the key before having a complete breakdown. Oh, she tried the key. All right. Multiple times. I watched her jiggle that handle for a good 5 minutes before it dawned on her that you actually changed the locks like you said you would. That's when things got interesting. Logan paused for dramatic effect. The bastard. He was enjoying this way too much, but honestly, so was I. After 4 years of Sophie's emotional manipulation and public humiliation tactics, the idea of her finally experiencing some consequences was more satisfying than a perfectly grilled steak. So, she starts banging on the door, right? Not just knocking, full-on pounding like the house is on fire. She's yelling, "Marcus, Marcus, I know you're in there." Loud enough that Mrs. Rodriguez came out of her house next door to see what the commotion was about. This goes on for maybe 10 minutes before Sophie finally pulls out her phone and calls you and got my voicemail because I was enjoying the peace and quiet of mountain living. Exactly. So, she leaves this message. I could hear her from my driveway, dude. Where she starts off trying to sound reasonable, like, "Marcus, I'm home. Let's talk about this like adults," but by the end of it, she's practically screaming about how you can't just lock her out of her own house, and she's going to call the police. I had to laugh at that one. Sophie's grasp of property law was about as solid as her understanding of basic human decency. Did she actually call the cops? Oh, she called them. All right. 2 patrol cars showed up about an hour later. I made myself busy in the front yard so I could watch the whole thing go down. The officers were actually pretty professional about it. They listened to her whole sob story about being locked out, asked to see some ID, and then politely explained that since her name isn't on the deed, and she doesn't have any legal documentation proving residency, there wasn't really anything they could do. How'd she take that news? About as well as you'd expect. Started crying, talking about how this was all some terrible misunderstanding, how you were just upset and you'd work it out like you always do. The cops basically told her it was a civil matter and suggested she contact a lawyer if she felt her rights were being violated. Then they left and that's when the real show started. I could picture the whole scene playing out in my quiet suburban neighborhood. Sophie's carefully constructed image crumbling in front of an audience of concerned neighbors and curious onlookers. After years of presenting herself as the perfect wife living the perfect life, having a public breakdown on my front porch was probably her worst nightmare. She spent the next 2 hours calling everyone in her contact list. Logan continued, and I mean everyone. I could hear her leaving increasingly desperate voicemails, talking to her parents, trying to reach Clara and Vivian. But here's the kicker. None of her rich friends answered their phones. Not one. Clara and Vivan, who she'd been posting pictures with just 24 hours earlier, suddenly became unreachable the moment she actually needed help. That part didn't surprise me at all. Clara and Vivian were fair-weather friends at best. The kind of people who enjoyed Sophie's company when it came with expensive restaurants and Instagram-worthy adventures, but who'd vanish the second things got messy or inconvenient. They'd probably seen her post from the airport and decided that associating with someone having a public breakdown wasn't good for their own carefully managed images. So, what happened next? Her parents finally called her back around 5 o'clock. Richard sounded pissed. I could hear him yelling through the phone from across the street. Helen was crying in the background. Took them about 2 hours to drive down from Ventura. And by the time they got there, Sophie had worked herself into a complete state. Logan paused to take a drink of something. Probably beer. Definitely earned. Marcus, I'm talking full-blown hysterics. She's sitting on her suitcase in the middle of your front porch, mascara running down her face, hair a mess, crying so hard she's hyperventilating, all while posting about it on her Instagram story, by the way, because apparently even a mental breakdown needs to be documented for content. You're kidding me. Dead serious. She's filming herself crying, talking about betrayal and abandonment, the whole victim narrative. But here's the thing, her follower count was actually dropping while she was posting. People were unfollowing her in real time as they watched this meltdown happen. I guess watching your aspirational lifestyle guru have a public breakdown kind of ruins the fantasy. The mental image of Sophie Liv tweeting her own destruction while sitting on a suitcase was almost too perfect to believe. After years of curating every moment of her life for maximum impact, she couldn't stop performing. Even when her world was falling apart, it was like watching someone try to direct their own disaster movie. When her parents finally showed up, Richard was beyond furious. Logan continued, I heard him ask her what the hell she'd done to make you change the locks, and Sophie just kept saying it was all a misunderstanding, that you were being dramatic, that you'd never actually follow through on leaving her. Helen was trying to calm everyone down, but you could tell she was mortified. Having your daughter's marriage implode in public view isn't exactly what any parent dreams of. Did they try to get into the house? Richard knocked on the door a few times, but when nobody answered, he seemed to figure out pretty quickly that you weren't home. Smart guy, your father-in-law. He loaded Sophie's luggage into their car and basically dragged her away from the scene before she could embarrass herself any further. But not before she left you about 50 more voicemails. I scrolled through my phone while Logan talked, looking at the tsunami of notifications Sophie had generated. The voicemails started reasonable and rapidly devolved into desperation, anger, bargaining, and finally what sounded like complete emotional collapse. It was like listening to the 5 stages of grief compressed into real-time audio format. The best part, Logan said, clearly saving his favorite detail for last, was watching all her neighbors peek out their windows and front doors during the whole spectacle. Your quiet little street got more drama in one afternoon than it usually sees in a decade. Mrs. Rodriguez was taking pictures from behind her curtains. The college kids across the street were recording videos. Sophie's breakdown is probably going to end up on someone's TikTok. That thought should have made me feel bad for her. But honestly, Sophie had spent years turning our private life into public content. Broadcasting our relationship for anyone with an internet connection to judge and comment on. Having her meltdown become someone else's entertainment seemed like poetic justice. How long did the whole thing last from the time she got out of the cab until her parents dragged her away? About 4 hours of pure chaos. And Marcus, I got to tell you, it was the most entertaining afternoon I've had in years. Better than cable. I thanked Logan for the detailed report and promised to buy him dinner when I got back from my road trip. As I ended the call and looked out over the Colorado landscape, mountains stretching to the horizon, clean air, absolute peace and quiet. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete satisfaction. Sophie had wanted freedom from being embarrassed by me. Mission accomplished. She was now free to be embarrassed entirely by her own actions. Nothing says I've completely lost control of my life. Quite like having your parents hire a lawyer to threaten your ex-husband with legal action. That's exactly what greeted me when I rolled back into Manhattan Beach after 2 weeks of the most peaceful road trip I'd taken in years. My mailbox contained the usual collection of bills, junk mail, and one very official-looking envelope from the law offices of Patterson, Burke, and Associates. Apparently, Richard and Helen's attorney of choice for their daughter's latest crisis. The letter was a masterpiece of legal posturing and empty threats, the kind of document that sounds scary if you don't know anything about actual law, but falls apart under even casual scrutiny. It was signed by someone named Jennifer Patterson, Esquire, who'd clearly been fed a very one-sided version of events and was now demanding everything from spousal support to restitution for emotional distress to my personal favorite, return of all marital assets to their proper shared status. I sat on my back patio with a beer and read through the whole thing twice, alternating between laughter and genuine amazement at the sheer audacity of it all. Sophie had apparently convinced her parents and their lawyer that I was some kind of financial abuser who'd stolen her belongings and illegally locked her out of the marital home. The letter demanded immediate access to the house, restoration of her rightful ownership of the SUV I'd sold, and compensation for damages to her professional reputation and earning capacity. The funniest part was the threat at the end. Failure to comply with these reasonable demands within 10 business days will result in immediate legal action to protect our client's interests and recover all damages sustained as a result of your unconscionable conduct. Unconscionable conduct. I love that phrase. Apparently, taking control of my own property and refusing to fund someone's lifestyle after they publicly humiliated me qualified as unconscionable conduct in the Patterson, Burke, and Associates universe. Lucky for me, I had Graham Morrison on speed dial. Graham had been my attorney since I bought the house. A straight-talking guy in his 60s who specialized in real estate and family law and had zero patience for legal. When I called him that afternoon and read him Patterson's letter over the phone, I could practically hear him rolling his eyes through the receiver. "Marcus, this is amateur hour stuff," Graham said. "They're making demands they have no legal basis for and threats they can't follow through on. Your wife's name isn't on the house deed. The car was titled in your name only. And last I checked, changing the locks on your own property isn't a criminal act. What exactly do they think they're going to sue you for? Apparently, I'm guilty of unconscionable conduct." "Right. Well, let me draft a response that'll educate Miss Patterson about what unconscionable conduct actually looks like." Graham's letter, which arrived at Patterson Burke and Associates 3 days later via certified mail, was a thing of beauty. Where their letter had been all bluster and empty threats, Graham's response was surgical in its precision and devastating in its implications. He started with the basics. A copy of the house deed showing sole ownership in my name, the car title proving sole ownership in my name, and documentation of all the joint accounts that had been legally closed with appropriate notice. Then he got to the fun part. Graham had itemized every expense I'd covered during our marriage that Sophie had never contributed to. Mortgage payments, property taxes, utilities, insurance, car payments, maintenance, repairs, and my personal favorite, The $18,000 I'd spent funding her European vacation and the lifestyle content that preceded it. He presented it all in a neat spreadsheet that showed Sophie had essentially been living rentier in my house while I subsidized her influencer career to the tune of roughly $75,000 over 4 years. But the rail kill shot came in the final paragraph. Mr. Hale welcomes your client's proposed lawsuit and is prepared to file an immediate counterclaim for unjust enrichment, conversion of services, and compensation for 4 years of uncompensated financial support. We estimate damages in the range of $200,000 plus attorney fees and court costs. Additionally, we have documented evidence of your client's public defamation campaign against Mr. Hale across multiple social media platforms which may constitute additional grounds for legal action. We encourage your client to carefully consider whether pursuing litigation is in her best interest. Graham had attached screenshots of Sophie's most unhinged social media posts, her deleted website content, and even some of the comments from Clara and Vivon that could be considered defamatory. The message was clear. If Sophie wanted to play legal hardball, she was going to discover that she'd brought a water gun to a rocket launcher fight. The response from Patterson Burke and Associates was swift and telling. Complete silence. No phone calls, no follow-up letters, no scheduled depositions or settlement conferences, just radio silence from a law firm that had apparently realized their client had no case and a whole lot of potential liability. I imagine Jennifer Patterson, Esquire, had some very uncomfortable conversations with Richard and Helen about the difference between what Sophie had told them and what the actual legal facts looked like. Sophie's social media presence, meanwhile, had evolved from frantic victim narrative to sporadic depression posting. Gone were the angry rants about betrayal and abandonment, replaced by vague inspirational quotes about new beginnings and finding yourself after toxic relationships. Her follower count continued to hemorrhage, dropping from over 50,000 to somewhere in the low 20s and falling fast. Clara and Vivon had completely ghosted her by this point, their own social media feeds conspicuously free of any mention of their former travel companion. Apparently, supporting your friend through a dramatic breakup was one thing, but associating with someone who was threatening legal action and posting erratically was bad for the personal brand. The best part was watching Sophie's content quality deteriorate in real time. Without the house as a backdrop, the designer clothes, the expensive lifestyle accessories, and most importantly, without my financial support, her posts looked increasingly desperate and amateur. She was trying to maintain the aspirational lifestyle guru aesthetic while clearly operating on a shoestring budget and probably living in her childhood bedroom at her parents' house. Logan kept me updated on the neighborhood gossip, reporting that Sophie had been spotted a few times driving by the house in her parents' old Honda Civic, presumably hoping to catch me home so she could attempt some kind of reconciliation. But I'd learned my lesson about predictable patterns. I varied my schedule, parked in different spots, and generally made myself unavailable for any dramatic confrontations. The silence from her legal team spoke volumes about the strength of her position, or lack thereof. When lawyers go quiet after making big threats, it usually means they've discovered their client has been less than truthful about the facts and they don't want to end up sanctioned by the court for filing frivolous lawsuits. 3 weeks after Graham's response letter, I got a call from Jennifer Patterson herself. Not a threatening demand or legal ultimatum, but a polite inquiry about whether I might be interested in discussing a mutually beneficial resolution to this matter outside of litigation. Translation: Sophie's parents had probably gotten the legal bill for their attorney's research into my actual position, realized their daughter had painted them a completely fictional version of events, and were now looking for a way to make this all go away without spending their retirement fund on a lawsuit they couldn't win. I told Patterson I'd consider any reasonable proposal, but that my position hadn't changed. Sophie was welcome to her belongings from storage, but everything else was final. No money, no house access, no reconciliation discussions. The call ended with Patterson promising to discuss options with her client and get back to me. That was 6 weeks ago, and I haven't heard from them since. Sometimes silence is the most eloquent response of all, for months. That's how long it took for Sophie's carefully constructed world to completely collapse and for my life to transform from supporting actor in someone else's drama to the starring role in my own story. For months since that morning at LAX when she told me not to walk with her because I'd embarrass her in front of her rich friends. For months since I decided to take her advice and step out of her life entirely. And what a 4 months it had been. I was sitting in my workshop, my actual workshop, not Sophie's former content creation studio, putting the finishing touches on a custom dining table I'd been commissioned to build for a client in Rundo Beach. The guest room had been completely transformed back into the space I'd always wanted. Workbenches along the walls, proper lighting for detailed work, tools organized exactly the way I liked them, and the smell of wood stain and sawdust that meant I was doing something real with my hands instead of just funding someone else's Instagram fantasies. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was making more money from my carpentry side business in 4 months than Sophie had ever earned from her influencer career. Turns out people actually pay good money for furniture that's built to last instead of just look good in photos. Who would have thought? Logan stopped by that afternoon with updates on Sophie's continuing downward spiral, which had become our monthly entertainment ritual. He'd grab a couple of beers from my fridge. I'd finish whatever project I was working on, and he'd fill me in on the latest developments in the Sophie Hale catastrophe tour. So, get this, Logan said, settling into the comfortable chair I'd built specifically for the workshop. My cousin Jennifer works at that fancy gallery in Santa Monica, right? Mitchell's place. She told me Sophie showed up there last week trying to sell herself as an interior designer. You're kidding me. Dead serious. Apparently, she walked in with a portfolio of photos from your old house. You know, back when she had it all staged for her Instagram posts and tried to convince Mitchell that she was some kind of design consultant. She wanted him to recommend her to his wealthy clients for home staging and decor consulting. I had to laugh at the pure audacity of it. Sophie was trying to monetize the aesthetic she'd imposed on my house. The same aesthetic that had turned my home into a sterile photography studio. How'd that go over? About as well as you'd expect. Mitchell took one look at her portfolio, recognized the house from when he'd visited you last year, and basically laughed her out of the gallery. Then he called me to make sure you knew about it. His exact words were, "Marcus, you dodged a bullet. A big expensive fake bullet." That was Mitchell for you. Art gallery owner, straight shooter, and someone who could spot a fake from a mile away. He'd been to a couple of dinner parties at the house back when Sophie was still playing the perfect wife role, and I could tell even then that he saw right through her act. But wait, it gets better, Logan continued. Jennifer said Sophie tried to argue with Mitchell about her professional experience and artistic vision. She actually pulled out her phone and started showing him her Instagram posts as proof of her design credentials. Mitchell asked her if she had any formal training, any actual clients, or any examples of work she'd done for other people. When she couldn't answer any of those questions, he suggested she might want to consider a different career path. The mental image of Sophie trying to convince a respected gallery owner that her Instagram feed qualified as professional experience was almost too perfect. It was like watching someone try to become a chef based solely on their restaurant selfies. So, what's she doing now? I asked, not because I really cared about Sophie's welfare, but because her continued poor decision-making had become a source of genuine entertainment. Living with her parents, as far as anyone can tell, her social media presence has basically dried up to nothing. Maybe one post a week, usually some recycled motivational quote about new beginnings or finding your true self. Her follower count is down to something like 15,000. And most of those are probably bots or people who forgot to unfollow. 15,000. I remembered when Sophie hit 50,000 followers and threw herself a celebration party that cost more than most people's cars. She talked about reaching a 100,000 like it was her destiny, her ticket to real influencer success. Now she was posting to an audience smaller than a decent high school football game and shrinking fast. Clara and Vivian gone. Completely ghosted her. I heard from Dave's girlfriend that Claire actually unfriended Sophie on Facebook last month. These were supposed to be her closest friends, the women she traveled to Europe with, and they dropped her the second she became inconvenient. That tracked perfectly with what I'd observed about Sophie's social circle. They were all about the image, the lifestyle, the Instagram-worthy moments. The second things got messy or real or complicated, they vanished like morning fog. Sophie had built her entire social life around people who saw her as an accessory to their own brands. And when she stopped being useful, they moved on without a backward glance. What about her parents? Richard and Helen are apparently not thrilled with their new permanent house guest. My neighbor's sister works at the bank where Helen does their accounting. And word is they're not exactly happy about funding Sophie's lifestyle while she figures things out, especially after they got the bill from that lawyer who accomplished absolutely nothing except proving Sophie lied to them about what actually happened. I felt a tiny pang of sympathy for Richard and Helen. They weren't bad people, just parents who'd enabled their daughter's worst impulses and were now dealing with the consequences. Having a 30-something daughter moved back home after spectacularly destroying her marriage probably wasn't how they'd planned to spend their golden years. The workshop door opened and my neighbor Tom poked his head in. "Marcus, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to let you know that woman was by again yesterday." Sophie, yeah, same routine as last time. Drove by real slow in that beat-up Honda, parked across the street for maybe 20 minutes, then left when Mrs. Rodriguez came out to get her mail. I don't think she's trying to cause trouble. Just I don't know. Maybe hoping to run into you. I thanked Tom and made a mental note to vary my schedule even more. The last thing I needed was an awkward confrontation in my own driveway, especially since I'd heard through the grapevine that Sophie was telling people we were just taking a break and would work things out eventually. Denial was apparently another stage of grief, and Sophie seemed to be camping out there indefinitely. Later that evening, I was planning my next adventure, a 3-week trip to Southeast Asia that I'd been researching for months. Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, places I'd always wanted to visit, but never could because Sophie's content calendar always took priority over actual travel experiences. Now I could go anywhere I wanted, stay as long as I liked, and experience it all without having to document every moment for social media. The freedom was intoxicating in a way I hadn't expected. Not just the financial freedom, though having control over my own money again was definitely nice. And not just the physical freedom, though being able to make decisions without consulting someone else's brand strategy was liberating. It was the mental freedom that really got to me. The ability to think my own thoughts, make my own choices, and live my own life without constantly worrying about how it would affect someone else's image. I pulled out my laptop and started booking flights, hotels, and experiences that appealed to me personally rather than what would photograph well. Cooking classes in Hanoi, temple visits in Siem Reap, beach time in southern Thailand. All chosen because I genuinely wanted to do them, not because they'd generate good content for an audience I'd never meet. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a second, I wondered if Sophie had gotten a new phone and was trying to reach me, but it turned out to be Mitchell from the gallery. "Marcus, hope you don't mind the text. Wanted to let you know I have a client interested in commissioning some custom pieces. Saw photos of your work at Logan's Place and wants to discuss a project. Good money if you're interested. Also, your ex-wife stopped by again today asking about business opportunities. Thought you should know." I smiled and typed back a quick response confirming my interest in the commission work. It felt good to be building something real, something that would last, something that had value beyond its appearance in a photograph. Sophie had always dismissed my carpentry as a hobby, something that got in the way of her more important pursuits. Now it was becoming a legitimate business, while her important pursuits had evaporated into irrelevance. That night, I sat on my back patio with a beer, looking out at the Pacific Ocean and thinking about the journey that had brought me here. For months ago, I'd been a supporting character in Sophie's carefully scripted life. The reliable husband who showed up when needed and faded into the background when convenient. Now, I was the protagonist of my own story, making choices based on what I wanted rather than what looked good for someone else's brand. Sophie had gotten exactly what she asked for that morning at the airport. She'd wanted freedom from being embarrassed by me, and I'd given her complete freedom from my presence in her life. She'd wanted to live without having to explain my existence to her social circle. And now she never had to mention me again. She'd wanted the space to be the glamorous, unattached lifestyle guru she thought she was meant to be. And I'd cleared every obstacle to that dream. The fact that she discovered she was neither glamorous nor capable of maintaining her lifestyle without my financial support wasn't my problem anymore. The fact that her social circle had abandoned her the moment things got complicated wasn't my responsibility to fix. The fact that her influencer career had collapsed under the weight of her own poor decisions wasn't something I needed to feel guilty about. I'd simply taken her at her word and acted accordingly. She'd shown me exactly how little she valued our relationship, and I'd responded by removing myself from it entirely. Clean, professional, final. As I finished my beer and headed inside to continue planning my Southeast Asian adventure, I realized something important. For the first time in years, I was genuinely excited about my future. Not nervous, not uncertain, not dependent on someone else's approval or support, just excited about all the possibilities that lay ahead. Sophie had thought she was married to someone who would always be there, always forgive, always support her regardless of how she treated him. What she'd actually been married to was someone who'd been taking notes, building his own life, and waiting for the right moment to step away from hers. She'd wanted a life that looked good online. I'd wanted a life that felt good in reality. In the end, she chose the image, and I chose the substance. And I was living proof that substance beats image every single time. Story 2. When my husband passed away, his wealthy boss called me and said, "I found something. Come to my office right now." Then he added, "And don't tell your son or your dill. You could be in danger." When I got there and saw who was standing at the door, I froze. I never thought that after 45 years of marriage, I would feel like a stranger in my own life. But there I was, seated in the front pew at Elijah's funeral, while my son Marcus and my daughter-in-law, Kira, handled every decision as if I didn't exist. "Mama, just leave this to us. You just worry about staying calm," Marcus had told me that morning with that condescending voice he had developed over the last few years. Kira nodded beside him with that false smile I'd grown all too familiar with. I stayed quiet because I didn't have the strength to fight. Elijah had died of a heart attack 3 days earlier so suddenly that I still couldn't fully process it. One moment he was eating breakfast with me, talking about the garden he wanted to plant in the spring, and the next I found him collapsed in the garage. I watched the people filling the community church, Elijah's co-workers, neighbors, some distant relatives. Everyone approached Marcus and Kira to offer condolences as if they were the ones who were widowed. I was just an old woman of 68 who needed to be shielded from the trauma. Grandma is very fragile, I heard Kira whisper to someone. Marcus and I are taking care of everything. Fragile. That word hurt more than any empty condolence. Elijah never saw me as fragile. To him, I was Lena, his partner, his equal. But ever since Marcus married Kira 5 years ago, everything had gradually changed. During the service, I noticed something strange. Marcus seemed more relieved than grief-stricken. Every time someone approached to console him, he responded with a composure that bordered on indifference. Kira, for her part, had tears in her eyes, but something about her expression felt calculated, as if she were putting on a performance. After the burial at the home Elijah and I had shared for so many years, people gathered for the lunch Kira had organized. I sat in my favorite chair by the window, watching my daughter-in-law run everything as if it were her own house. Lena, you should go rest, Kira suggested, approaching me with a cup of tea I hadn't asked for. It's been a very long day for you. I'm fine right here, I replied, but my voice sounded weaker than I intended. Marcus came over and sat on the sofa across from me. Mama, Kira and I have been talking. We don't think you should stay in this house alone. It's too big for you, and after what happened with Dad. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Well, Marcus continued, exchanging a look with Kira. There are some very nice retirement communities where you'd be safer with people your own age activities. I am not going to any nursing home, I said, feeling indignation give me strength I didn't know I had. Kira sat beside me, taking my hand with a softness I found unbearable. It's not a nursing home, Lena. They are elegant senior living facilities, and we could visit you every weekend. This is my home, I mumbled, but I already felt my resolve crumbling under their pitying gazes. The conversation was interrupted by the phone ringing. Marcus got up to answer it, and I could hear his voice from the kitchen, though not the exact words. When he returned, his expression had changed. It was someone from Dad's office, he said, looking annoyed. They wanted to talk to you about some paperwork. What paperwork? I asked. I don't know. I told him you were indisposed, that they could arrange anything with me. Something in his tone bothered me. Marcus, your father worked at that company for 30 years. If they want to talk to me about something, I have the right to hear it. Mama, don't worry about those things. We'll handle all the paperwork and legal affairs. That night, after everyone left and Marcus and Kira finally left me alone, I sat on the bed I had shared with Elijah for so many years. The house was too silent, full of memories that now felt distant. That's when my cell phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Mrs. Lena Odom, a man's voice said on the other end of the line. I'm Theodore Vance, your husband's boss at Sterling and Grant Financial. Mr. Vance, I replied, recalling the name. Elijah had mentioned his boss several times, always with respect. Ma'am, I am so sorry for your loss. Elijah was an extraordinary man and everyone at the office valued him immensely. Thank you, I murmured. There was a pause and then his voice became more serious. Mrs. Odom, I need to see you urgently. There's something you need to know about the last few months of your husband's life. Something important. My heart started beating faster. What kind of thing? I can't talk over the phone. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? And ma'am, it is crucial that you don't tell your son or daughter-in-law anything about this conversation. Elijah was very specific about that. The air caught in my lungs. Why? What is going on? Please, Mrs. Odom, come tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. Your husband asked me that if anything happened to him, I should make sure to speak with you, but only with you. The line cut off and I was left sitting in the dark holding the phone with trembling hands. Elijah had anticipated his death. He had left specific instructions and for some reason those instructions included keeping Marcus and Kira out of the loop. For the first time since his death, I felt like my husband was talking to me from somewhere far away, telling me to pay attention, that this was not the time to be fragile. Something was terribly wrong, and I was the only one who could figure it out. The next morning, I woke up with a determination I hadn't felt in months. For the first time since Elijah's death, I had a clear purpose. I dressed carefully, choosing the navy blue suit Elijah always said made me look elegant and strong. Marcus called early, as he had been doing since the funeral. How did you sleep, Mama? Kara and I were thinking maybe you should stay with us for a few days. I'm fine, son, I replied, trying to sound normal. In fact, I have to go out this morning. There was a pause. Go out where? My mind worked quickly. To the pharmacy. I ran out of my blood pressure pills. I can bring you the pills. You don't have to go out, Marcus. I can drive to the drugstore. I am not an invalid. His sigh was audible through the phone. All right, but be careful. And if you need anything, call us immediately. I drove downtown with my hands clenched on the steering wheel. The Sterling and Grant Financial Building was a 20-story glass tower that had always intimidated me a little. Elijah worked on the 15th floor in the internal audit department. The receptionist guided me to the executive floor where I had never been. Theodore Vance's office was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. Mahogany furniture and a sense of power that permeated the air. Theodore Vance was a man of about 55 with perfectly styled gray hair and a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He stood up when I entered and I saw genuine concern in his eyes. "Mrs. Odom, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." I settled into one of the leather chairs in front of his desk, feeling as if I was in uncharted territory. "First of all," Theo began, "I want you to know that your husband was one of our most valuable employees. In 30 years, we never had a single complaint about his work." "Thank you," I murmured, although something in his tone told me this was just the preamble. Theo stood up and walked to a file cabinet behind his desk. He took out a thick folder and placed it in front of me. "Mrs. Dodom. During the last 6 months of his life, Elijah came to see me several times with very specific concerns." He opened the folder revealing pages and pages of documents, handwritten notes in Elijah's familiar script, and what looked like photographs of other documents. "Concerns about what?" Theo looked me straight in the eyes. "About his family." I felt like the floor had moved beneath my feet. My family. Elijah believed that his son and daughter-in-law were trying to manipulate him into making significant changes to his will and his bank accounts. The words didn't make immediate sense. That is impossible. Marcus would never." "Mrs. Odom," he interrupted gently. "Did you know that in the last 8 months Elijah received multiple visits from your son and daughter-in-law, often when you were not home? They repeatedly suggested to him that it would be better for you if he organized things so that if something happened to him, Marcus would have immediate legal power over all financial and medical decisions related to you." I shook my head. But something cold settled in my stomach. "That can't be true," I whispered. Theo opened one of the pages and turned it toward me. It was a photocopy of a partially completed legal document. I recognized Elijah's signature at the bottom, but it was crossed out. "Elijah brought this to me 3 months ago. He said Marcus had pressured him to sign it, telling him it was best for the family and that it would protect you from having to make difficult decisions if you were gone." I read the first lines of the document. It was a transfer of power of attorney that would have given Marcus total control over all our finances and medical decisions related to me if Elijah died or became incapacitated. But he didn't sign it. I observed. "No." And that's what started to worry Elijah. As he told me when he refused to sign it, Marcus became very upset. He told him he was being selfish, that he wasn't thinking about what would be best for you. My mind began to make connections I didn't want to make. I remembered Marcus and Kira's visits over the last year, how they always seemed to be whispering about something when I entered the room. "There's more," Theo continued, turning to another page. "Elijah also told me that Kira had begun suggesting you were showing signs of confusion, of memory loss." "What?" "Apparently, she had started commenting to both Elijah and Marcus that you were repeating stories, forgetting conversations, that perhaps you needed closer medical supervision." I felt like I had been punched. "I'm not. My memory is perfectly fine." Elijah knew that. That's why he started documenting everything, every conversation, every suggestion, every pressure he felt from them. Theo flipped through several more pages, showing me detailed notes in Elijah's hand, dates, times, transcribed conversations. My husband had been keeping a meticulous record of what now appeared to be a sustained campaign to undermine my confidence and gain control over our lives. "Why didn't he tell me anything?" I asked, feeling tears that I didn't know I had. "He told me he didn't want to worry you until he was sure what was happening. He hoped he was wrong." Just then, a loud knock sounded on the office door. Theo and I turned and my heart stopped when I saw who entered. Marcus and Kira were standing in the doorway. Their expressions a mixture of surprise and something darker. "Mama," Marcus said, and his voice had a tone I had never heard before. "What are you doing here?" Kira stepped forward with that condescending smile I now recognized as a mask. "Lena, we were so worried when we couldn't find you at home. Why didn't you tell us you were coming here?" Theo stood up slowly, and I could see tension in every line of his body. "Mr. Odom, Mrs. Odom, this is a private conversation between your mother and me. I would appreciate it if you would respect that." Kira let out a forced laugh. "With all due respect, Mr. Advance." Lena has been very fragile since Elijah's death. We don't think it's appropriate for her to make important decisions without family supervision. Family supervision? I repeated, feeling the indignation rise in my chest. I'm 68 years old. I'm not a child. Marcus exchanged a glance with Kira that did not go unnoticed by me. It was the same look they had shared at the funeral, heavy with a meaning I didn't understand. Of course, you're not a child, Mama, Marcus said. But his tone was the same one he would use with a difficult child. It's just that we want to protect you from people who might take advantage of your grief. I looked at Theo, who had remained silent, watching the exchange with a serious expression. Then I looked at the closed folder on the desk, knowing it contained information that would change everything. Theo, I said, using his name deliberately. Could you give me a few minutes to talk to my son and daughter-in-law? He nodded. Of course. I'll be right outside. Once he left, the air in the room changed completely. Marcus visibly relaxed as if he had won something important. Mama, I don't know what that man has been telling you, but you have to understand that people can be very manipulative when money is involved. Money? I asked. Kira sat down in the chair next to me. Lena, honey, we know Elijah had a considerable life insurance policy, and with the house and his savings, there are unscrupulous people who take advantage of widows. Something cold settled in my stomach. How do you two know about Elijah's life insurance? Marcus and Kira exchanged another one of those charged glances. Well, Marcus said, looking uncomfortable for the first time. Dad mentioned it a few months ago when we were talking about making sure you were taken care of if something happened to him. Funny, I said slowly, because Elijah never mentioned those conversations to me. The silence stretched between us. That's when I heard a sound that brought my world to a complete halt. A cough. A cough I would recognize anywhere in the world. The three of us turned toward the door of the private bathroom connected to Theo's office. The door slowly opened and a figure emerged that made my heart stop and then start pounding so hard I thought it would jump out of my chest. Elijah, my husband, the man I had buried 4 days ago, was standing there alive, breathing, looking at me with a mixture of love and apology in his eyes. Hello, Lena, he said softly. I think I screamed. I'm not sure. What I do remember is that the world started spinning around me, and if Elijah hadn't rushed toward me, I would have fallen out of the chair. What? How? I mumbled, touching his face with trembling hands to make sure it was real. Behind us, I heard Kira let out a gasp, and Marcus murmur a word I prefer not to repeat. Elijah held me carefully, his familiar hands steadying me as they had for 45 years. I'm sorry, my love. I'm so sorry to have put you through this. But it was the only way. The only way to what? I asked, though a part of me was already beginning to understand. Elijah looked up at Marcus and Kira, and his expression hardened in a way I had never seen before. The only way to protect you from them. Marcus found his voice first. This is impossible. You're dead. We saw you. There was a funeral. There's a death certificate. Elijah straightened up but kept a protective arm around me. There was a falsified death certificate with the help of a very discreet doctor and a funeral director who owed a few favors. Theo helped me set up everything. But why? I whispered. Elijah looked at me tenderly before addressing Marcus and Kira again. Because I found out what you were planning. Kira turned pale. I don't know what you're talking about. No, Elijah said, walking toward the desk and opening the folder Theo had closed. Then you don't recognize this? He pulled out a series of documents and placed them on the desk. Even from where I was sitting, I could see they were copies of emails, text messages, and what appeared to be transcribed recordings. Mama is starting to show signs of dementia. I think you should consider the possibility of her needing full-time care soon. If Dad signs the documents I prepared for him, we can make sure she has the best possible care when the time comes. Elijah read aloud from the document. My son had gone completely white. Elijah continued reading. Kira agreed, and the sooner the better. The house alone is worth almost $500,000, and that's not counting his retirement savings. I sat down heavily, feeling like I had received a physical blow. They had been planning to declare me incompetent. They had been calculating the value of our house, of our savings. This is taken out of context, Marcus said desperately. We were worried about Mama. We just wanted to make sure. Make sure of what? Elijah interrupted. That you could control her life. That you could declare her incompetent and put her in an institution while you sold the house and spent our savings. Kira stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous, Elijah. Faking your own death is a crime. There are fake certificates, fraudulent documents. You're right, Elijah said calmly. I am willing to face the consequences. But first, I wanted Lena to know the truth about what you two have been planning. He walked up to me and took my hands. My love, for the last 8 months, they have been visiting me regularly when you are not here. At first, I thought it was because they worried about us. But I gradually realized that every conversation was designed to convince me that you were losing mental capacity, that you needed supervision, that it would be selfish of me not to make legal arrangements to protect you. I looked at Marcus, my son, the baby I had carried in my arms, whom I had comforted during nightmares, whom I had loved unconditionally for 35 years. Is that true? I asked him. For a moment, I saw something in his eyes that might have been shame, but then it hardened. Mama, you don't understand the financial pressures we face. Kira and I have debts, obligations. So, it was true, I murmured. Elijah squeezed my hands. When I realized what was happening, I hired a private investigator. We discovered that Marcus has gambling debts of over $150,000 and Kira has been using credit cards in your name without your knowledge. The world wobbled around me once more. Credit cards in my name? 3 different cards? Elijah said softly with a total debt of over $10,000. Kira finally exploded. This is enough, Elijah. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but this ends now. Lena, let's go. Clearly, your husband has lost his mind. But I didn't move. For the first time in months, maybe years, everything made sense. The constant visits, the exaggerated concern for my well-being, the suggestions about my memory, the rush to make me make decisions about my future immediately after the funeral. They hadn't been taking care of me. They had been preparing me to be sacrificed. I am not going anywhere, I finally said. My voice was stronger than it had sounded in a long time. But I think you two should leave. The expression on Marcus's face changed to something I had never seen before. He was no longer my worried son. He was a stranger who had just lost something he had been counting as his. Elijah helped me sit on the office sofa while Theo returned with a bottle of water and a grave expression. Marcus and Kira remained standing near the door like cornered animals deciding whether to flee or attack. Lena, Elijah said softly, kneeling in front of me. There's more you need to know. My mind was still struggling to process that my husband was alive, that he had faked his death, that my son and daughter-in-law had been planning to steal everything from me for months. But something in Elijah's expression told me the worst was yet to come. More, I murmured. Theo opened another section of the folder and pulled out what looked like a series of photographs. He placed them on the coffee table in front of us. These photos were taken by the private investigator over the last 6 weeks, Elijah explained. I picked up the photographs with trembling hands. The first showed Marcus entering what looked like a casino. The second showed him at a poker table betting chips representing amounts of money I couldn't imagine. The third showed Kira in an expensive jewelry store trying on a necklace that cost more than our mortgage payment. Marcus, Elijah said, his voice cold as ice. Do you want to explain to your mother how you could bet $25,000 in a single night when you told me you needed help paying the mortgage? My son didn't answer, but I could see his jaws clench. Elijah continued, or maybe Kira can explain how she could buy a $4,000 necklace last week when you are supposedly struggling to make ends meet. Kira finally spoke. Her voice now stripped of all the false sweetness she had been using with me. Elijah, you don't know what you're talking about. That necklace was an imitation. An imitation of Tiffany and Amos? Theo asked, pulling a receipt from the folder. Because we have the receipt here, paid with a credit card in the name of Lena Odom. I felt like I had been slapped. You used my name to buy jewelry. Lena, Kira said, and for the first time, her mask completely cracked. You don't understand. Marcus and I are under so much pressure. His debts, our expenses. We just needed a little temporary help. Temporary? I repeated. How long have you been stealing from me? Elijah pulled out another document. According to our investigator, the fraudulent transaction started 1.5 years ago. You used her information to open 3 credit cards. You have made unauthorized withdrawals from her savings account totaling over $1,000 and you have been intercepting her bank correspondence so she wouldn't notice. Intercepting my correspondence? Do you remember when Kira offered to help you with the mail a few months ago? Elijah asked when she said it would be easier if she handled organizing all your important accounts and documents. The memory hit me like lightning. Kira had been so sweet, so helpful. Lena, honey, I know these financial things can be confusing. Why don't you let me handle organizing everything for you? Elijah has so much work, and you already have enough worries, but that's not the worst of it, Elijah continued, his expression growing even gluier. What could be worse than this? I asked. Elijah looked at Marcus straight in the eyes. Tell your mother about the plan for the assisted living. Marcus went completely pale. I don't know what you're talking about. No, Theo said, pulling a small voice recorder from his desk. Because we have this. He pressed the playback button, and Marcus' voice filled the office. It was a phone conversation, likely recorded without his knowledge. Kira, we need to speed up the timeline. Dad is starting to ask questions, and Mama isn't acting as confused as we hoped. Kira's voice responded from the recorder. I already spoke to the director at the Magnolia place. Did you say you have the medical documents we need? The fake documents are ready. Once Mama is institutionalized, we can sell the house immediately. The market is good right now. I felt like I was falling off a cliff. Fake medical documents. The recording continued. And what if Elijah objects? Kira asked. Elijah isn't going to be a problem for much longer. Marcus replied, and something in his tone made my blood run cold. Elijah paused the recording and looked at me with eyes full of pain. That conversation was recorded 3 weeks ago, Lena, 3 weeks before my death. The silence in the office was deafening. I looked at Marcus trying to find some explanation, some way that this wasn't what it seemed. Elijah wasn't going to be a problem for much longer, I repeated slowly. What does that mean, Marcus? My son finally spoke, but his voice was that of a stranger. Mama, you're misinterpreting everything. We were just worried about Dad. His blood pressure had been high. He had been very stressed. Are you saying you were just waiting for me to die naturally? Elijah asked, standing up. Kira stepped forward, all pretense abandoned. Elijah, don't be dramatic. We were just being realistic about the future. Lena is going to need care eventually, and it's better to plan ahead. Plan ahead, I repeated, or speed up the process. Theo pulled another document from the folder. Lena, this may be the hardest thing to hear. It was a medical report. I read the first lines with growing horror. Patient shows clear signs of early dementia, episodes of confusion, short-term memory loss, disorientation. Evaluation for full-time care recommended. This is a lie, I said. My voice was barely a whisper. I've never seen this doctor. Dr. Silas Thorne. I don't recognize this name. He's Kira's doctor, Elijah said. Someone who was willing to sign a false diagnosis in exchange for $10,000. I looked at Kira, the woman I had called daughter, for 5 years. You paid a doctor to say I have dementia, Lena, Kira said. And for the first time, I could see real panic in her eyes. You have to understand. We were trying to protect you. Protect me from what? I cried out, surprised by the strength of my own voice. From yourself? Marcus shouted back. Mama, you're old. Your mind isn't what it used to be. Kira and I can see things you can't see. Elijah stepped between Marcus and me. Lena has no mental problems. The only problem is that you have been gaslighting a 68-year-old woman for over a year, making her question her own reality so you could steal her money and her house. Gaslighting? What? I asked. Gaslighting? Theo explained. It's a form of psychological manipulation where someone makes you doubt your own perception of reality. Elijah sat next to me and took my hands. My love, do you remember a few months ago when you couldn't find your car keys and Kira suggested maybe you had lost them because your memory wasn't what it used to be? I nodded. It had been very distressing. We found the keys in Kira's purse, Elijah said softly. She had taken them. And do you remember when you couldn't find your blood pressure medication and Marcus said you had probably forgotten where you put it? My heart began to beat faster. Yes, it was also in Marcus's car. One by one, Elijah began to explain situations that I had interpreted as signs of my mental decline. The day I couldn't find my purse, the time I was late for an appointment because I was sure it was at a different hour, the occasions when I couldn't recall conversations I was sure I had had. All of them had been orchestrated for months. Elijah said, they have been systematically making you doubt your own mind, preparing the ground to declare you incompetent. I looked at Marcus and Kira, these two people I had loved and trusted. Why? I whispered. We're Unc family? Kira laughed, a bitter sound I had never heard from her before. Family, Lena? You and Elijah have been an obstacle for us since the day we got married. Sitting in this huge house accumulating money you never use while Marcus and I struggle every month. You never asked us for help, I said weakly. We didn't want your help, Marcus said. We wanted what's rightfully ours. What's rightfully yours? We are your family, Marcus exploded. That house should be ours. That money should be ours. You're going to die soon anyway. The silence that followed those words was absolute. In that moment, I knew I had lost my son forever. The person standing in front of me was a stranger who had been using my love against me, counting the days until my death so he could collect. But I also knew something else. For the first time in over a year, my mind was completely clear. I wasn't confused. I didn't have dementia. I was the victim of a cruel and systematic conspiracy carried out by the two people I trusted most. And now that I knew the truth, I would never be the same again. The following days were an emotional roller coaster I will never forget. Elijah stayed in a discreet hotel while Theo helped us navigate the legal complications of his resurrection. I returned home, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a prisoner in my own life. Marcus and Kira had left Theo's office that day in a state of shock and fury. I hadn't heard from them for 48 hours until they appeared at my door on a Wednesday morning. I watched them arrive from the living room window. Marcus walked with that determination I recognized from his childhood when he had done something wrong and was determined to convince me it wasn't his fault. Kira followed him, but something in her posture told me the strategy this time would be different. I opened the door before they could ring the doorbell. "Hello, Mama," Marcus said, and his voice had that carefully controlled quality he used when trying to manage a difficult situation. "Marcus, Kira." My voice sounded colder than I intended, but I didn't try to soften it. "Can we come in?" Kira asked. "We need to talk." I let them in, but I didn't invite them to sit down. We stood in the living room that had witnessed so many happy family gatherings and now felt like a battlefield. "Mama," Marcus began, thinking a lot about what happened in the office. "I'm sure you have." Kira took a step forward. "Lena, I think there are a lot of misunderstandings here." "Yes, Marcus and I have been concerned about your well-being, but everything we did was with the best intentions." "The best intentions," I repeated, "like using my name to open credit cards." "Those cards were for emergencies," Marcus said quickly. "Expenses that might arise related to your care, like a $4,000 necklace." Kira sighed. "Okay, I made a mistake, but Lena, you have to understand the pressure we've been under." "Marcus, debts are expenses." "Your debts are not my responsibility," I said, surprised by how easy it was to say those words. Marcus changed tactics. "Mama, Dad is manipulating you. Doesn't it seem strange that he would fake his own death? What kind of man does that? The kind of man who is trying to protect his wife from a son who is planning to steal everything from her." "We weren't stealing," Marcus exploded. "That house, that money, it was eventually going to be ours anyway. We were just trying to speed up the process because we needed help." The brutal honesty of that statement left me speechless for a moment. "Marcus," I finally said, "you are telling me that you have been waiting for Elijah and me to die so you could have our money. That's not how it sounds." Kira intervened desperately. "All families plan for the future. Families do not plan to declare their parents incompetent with false medical diagnosis." Kira turned pale. That was just a precaution in case you truly needed care in the future. A precaution you paid for with $10,000. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. A sign he was losing patience. "Mama, listen to yourself. You've become paranoid. Dad is filling your head with crazy ideas." "Crazy ideas," I repeated. "Like the idea that I deserve to live in my own home without anyone trying to declare me crazy." "No one is trying to declare you crazy," Marcus yelled. I walked to the phone and dialed a number I had memorized. "What are you doing?" Kira asked. "Calling Elijah," I replied. "I think he should be here for this conversation." "Mama, no," Marcus said, but it was already too late. Elijah arrived 20 minutes later. He had been expecting my call, probably knowing this moment would come. When he walked in, the tension in the room immediately intensified. "Marcus, Kira," he greeted them in a neutral voice. "Dad," Marcus said. "We need to resolve this as a family." Elijah sat next to me on the sofa, automatically taking my hand. "I'm listening." Kira sat in the chair opposite us, assuming her most vulnerable posture. "Elijah, I know what we did looks bad, but you have to understand that we were desperate." "Explain the desperation," Elijah said. Marcus began to speak quickly, the words rushing out as if he had been rehearsing this speech. "The debts piled up faster than we expected. The casino. I know it was stupid, but I thought I could win money fast. And when that didn't work, we panicked." "So, you decided to rob your parents?" Elijah asked. "It's not robbing," Marcus shouted. "You have more money than you'll ever spend. That house is too big for two people. We were just accelerating the inheritance." "Accelerating the inheritance by declaring me incompetent?" I asked. Kira started to cry. Not real tears, but the kind of calculated crying I had seen her use on other occasions when she wanted to get something. "Lena, we never wanted to hurt you. We just wanted to ensure you were taken care of and that we could pay off our debts. You thought you could manage both by stealing my money and locking me up in an assisted living facility." "I said it wasn't a nursing home," Marcus said. "The Magnolia Place is a very nice retirement community. You would have been comfortable there. Against my will. You would have adapted eventually, Kira murmured. The silence that followed was absolute. I think it was at that moment that even they realized how monstrous what they had been planning sounded. Elijah slowly stood up. Marcus, I want you to listen very carefully to what I am about to say. My son looked up and for a moment I saw a flicker of the child he had been. Your mother and I have decided that you are no longer a part of our lives, Elijah said in a firm but unemotional voice. We don't want to see you. We don't want to hear from you, and we definitely don't want you to have access to any of our finances or properties. Marcus jumped to his feet. You can't do that. I'm your son. You are my biological son, Elijah corrected. But you stopped being my family the day you decided our death would be more convenient for you than our life. Kira also stood up, her crying now completely abandoned. This is ridiculous, Elijah. Lena, you can't cut us off completely. We're family. No, I said, also standing up. Family doesn't try to steal. Family doesn't try to make their loved ones doubt their own sanity. Family doesn't count the days until you die to cash in your money. Marcus looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. You know what, Mama? Maybe you're right. Maybe this is better for everyone. Because I was already tired of pretending that I cared about you when all I really wanted was for you to get out of the way. Those words hit me like a physical slap. But strangely, they also liberated me. All the love, all the guilt, all the hope that there might be some misunderstanding evaporated at that moment. Leave, I said simply. Take your things out of my house and leave. Gladly, Marcus said. But this doesn't end here. We're going to fight this. We're going to prove that Dad faked his death, that you're not competent to make decisions. Elijah smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Go ahead. And when you do, be sure to explain to the judge why you were planning to declare your mother incompetent with fake medical documents. I'm sure he'll be very interested in hearing about that. Marcus and Kira looked at each other, and I could see the panic growing in their eyes as they realized they had no exit strategy. This doesn't end here, Marcus muttered. But his voice had lost all conviction. Yes, it does. I said, it ends exactly here. I watched them leave, knowing it would probably be the last time I would see my son. I should have felt sadness, but all I felt was a deep, clean relief. For the first time in over a year, I was free. 6 months later, I am sitting on the porch of our new home, watching Elijah plant roses in the garden he had always dreamed of having. We moved to a small town called Redwood Springs, 3 hours away, where no one knows our story and where we can simply be Elijah and Lena, a retired couple enjoying their golden years. The transition was not easy. There were moments, especially during the first few weeks, when I woke up in the pre-dawn hours wondering if we had done the right thing. Cutting off Marcus completely felt like amputating a part of my body, no matter how infected it was. But Elijah constantly reminded me why we had made that decision. My love, he would say when he found me crying at night. You cannot save someone who is willing to destroy you. Theo had helped us manage the legal complications. Falsifying the death certificate resulted in some fines and community service for Elijah. But when the evidence of Marcus and Kira's conspiracy was presented, the judge was surprisingly sympathetic. I've seen many cases of elder financial abuse, he had told us during the hearing, but rarely one as systematic and cruel as this. Marcus and Kira tried to follow through on their threat to fight legally, but their case quickly fell apart when the district attorney decided to investigate the fraudulent credit cards and the false medical documents. In the end, they were the ones who faced criminal charges, not us. The last I heard of them, Marcus was serving 18 months of probation for financial fraud. Kira had lost her nursing license. They had divorced 6 weeks after everything came to light, each blaming the other for dragging them into such a desperate situation. I feel no satisfaction in their downfall. I only feel a strange sense of closure, like when you finish reading a book that had been disturbing you, and you can finally put it aside. We sold the big house where we had raised Marcus. It was too full of complicated memories, and frankly, they were right about one thing. It was too big for 2 people. With the money from the sale, we bought this smaller house in Redwood Springs with enough land for Elijah's garden and a view of the mountains that makes every sunrise feel like a gift. We also paid off all the debts Marcus and Kira had accumulated in our name. Not because we owed it to them, but because we wanted to start this new phase of our lives completely clean without any financial connection to our past. Do you think Marcus will ever understand what he did? I asked Elijah one evening as we prepared dinner together. Elijah stops chopping vegetables and looks at me with those wise eyes that made me fall in love with him 46 years ago. I don't know, my love, but it is no longer our responsibility to teach him. That is the hardest lesson I have learned in these months. For 35 years, I felt responsible for Marcus' happiness and well-being. Even when he became an adult, even when he got married, he was still my baby who needed protection and guidance. But some adults choose paths their parents cannot follow. And sometimes the truest love is knowing when to let them go. We've made new friends here. Brenda and George, the couple next door, invited us to dinner last week. During the conversation, Brenda mentioned that they had cut ties with their son 10 years ago. He was an addict, she explained simply. And every time we tried to help him, he dragged us into his chaos. In the end, we had to choose to save our marriage and our sanity or continue to be victims of his destruction. Was it difficult? I asked. George took Brenda's hand. It was the hardest decision of our lives. But it was also the one that saved us. I hadn't realized until that moment how much I needed to hear that we weren't the only parents who had to make such an extreme decision. This morning, Elijah brought me coffee in bed, a routine we've developed in our new life. As I took my first sip, I noticed he had left a letter on the nightstand. "What is this?" I asked. "It arrived yesterday. It's from Marcus." My heart stopped for a moment. "Did you read it?" "It's for you." I held the letter for several minutes before opening it. The handwriting was the same I had seen on thousands of Mother's Day cards, but the words were those of a stranger. "Mama," it began. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to tell you something. Kira and I divorced. She blamed everything that happened on my gambling debts, but I know the truth is more complicated than that." He went on to explain that he was in therapy trying to understand how he had reached the point of conspiring against his own parents. The therapist says, "I have entitlement issues, that I've always felt I deserved things without working for them." It came to the point near the end. "I'm not asking for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did and I understand why you had to walk away from me. If you ever want to give me another chance, I'll be working to be the person I should have been all along." When I finished reading, I handed the letter to Elijah. "What do you think?" "I think he sounds like someone who is trying to change," I said honestly. "But I also think words are easy." Elijah nodded. "And what do you want to do?" "Nothing," I said, surprising myself with the certainty of my answer. "I want to continue living our life. And if one day he proves with real actions that he has changed, maybe we can reconsider. And if he never does," I looked out the window at the garden where the roses Elijah had planted were beginning to bloom. "Then we will live a beautiful life without him." That afternoon, while Elijah worked in the garden, I decided to write my own letter, not to Marcus, but to myself, a kind of declaration of independence from the guilt I had been carrying. "Dear 68-year-old Lena," I wrote, "forgive yourself for loving so much that it almost cost you everything. Forgive yourself for trusting so much that it almost cost you your sanity. Forgive yourself for believing that family love is always unconditional. But also celebrate your strength. Celebrate that when you finally saw the truth, you had the courage to act on it. Celebrate that you chose your own life over everyone else's comfort." That night, as Elijah and I prepared for sleep in our new bedroom with a view of the mountains, he asked me, "Do you regret anything? Cutting him off completely?" "No," I replied without hesitation, "not seeing the sign sooner sometimes." "And me faking my death?" I smiled. "It was dramatic, but effective," Elijah laughed. "Definitely effective." We were silent for a moment, listening to the sounds of the night in our new home. "You know what the strangest thing is?" I said finally. "What?" "I feel younger now than I did when I was 50. As if I had been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there." Elijah took my hand in the darkness. "That's what happens when you stop living for other people and start living for yourself." This morning, I received a call from Brenda, our new neighbor. "Lena," she said, "a group of us are going to the farmer's market on Saturday, and then we thought we'd grab lunch at that new French cafe. Would you like to come?" "I'd love to," I replied without hesitation. A year ago, I would have had to consult with Marcus and Kira, make sure they didn't need anything. Consider if it was appropriate for a woman my age to go out with friends. Now I simply say yes to the things that make me happy. As I write these lines, sitting on my porch with a cup of tea and the sound of Elijah whistling as he waters his roses, I realize that this is the first time in decades that I feel completely free. Free from guilt, free from expectations, free from the need to justify my decisions to people who never had my best interests at heart. Marcus was right about one thing. Elijah and I probably won't live many more years, but the years we have left will be ours. Lived on our terms, surrounded by people who love us unconditionally and without hidden agendas. And I discovered that is worth more than any toxic family tie I may have lost in the process. Sometimes the greatest freedom comes from having the courage to walk into the unknown, leaving behind even those you loved most when the love had become indistinguishable from the harm. Tonight I will sleep soundly for the first time in 2 years, knowing that tomorrow I will wake up to a life that is completely mine. Story 3. On Christmas, I arrived earlier than planned at the party at my wife's parents' house. I was shocked when I heard my wife say, I'm pregnant for my boss. Jake, we are about to be a family. I left quietly. 3 weeks later, everyone went pale when they saw I wasn't supposed to be there yet. That's the thing about fate. It doesn't ask permission before it rewrites your entire life in the span of a single overheard sentence. The drive from the airport had been faster than I'd anticipated. No traffic on Christmas Eve, just empty highways dusted with a fresh snow that caught the headlights like scattered diamonds. I'd caught an earlier flight, wanted to surprise Emma, 3 months away on that engineering project in Dubai. And all I could think about during those endless desert nights was coming home to her, to us, to the life we'd built together over 7 years of marriage. I pulled into her parents' driveway at 7:15. The party wasn't supposed to start until 8, but the windows were already glowing warm against the December darkness, and I could see silhouettes moving inside. Classic Christmas music drifted out, muffled by walls and windows, but unmistakable. Bing Crosby dreaming of a white Christmas while I sat in my rental car, grinning like an idiot, imagining Emma's face when she saw me walk through that door. I grabbed the gifts from the trunk. Carefully wrapped packages I'd agonized over in Dubai's gold souk and electronics district. A vintage bracelet for Emma that cost more than my first car. Scotch for her father. French perfume for her mother. I was good at this, at being the son-in-law who remembered, who cared, who showed up. I always showed up. The front door was unlocked. They never locked it during parties. Said it made guests feel unwelcome to have to knock. I stepped inside quietly, thinking I'd hear Emma's laugh first. That bright cascading sound that had made me fall in love with her in a coffee shop 8 years ago when she'd been arguing with a barista about the philosophical implications of oat milk. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine. Their Christmas tree stood in the corner of the living room, 15 feet of Douglas fir drowning in ornaments and white lights. I could hear voices coming from the kitchen, that particular hum of pre-party preparation, and I moved toward it with my surprise intact, my smile ready, my heart full of 3 months' worth of missing her. I was 10 feet from the kitchen doorway when I heard my wife's voice, clear and bright and excited in a way I hadn't heard in months. I'm pregnant. I stopped. The packages in my arms suddenly felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. Oh my God, Emma. That was her mother, Catherine. Voice pitched high with surprise and joy. When did you find out? Does Marcus know? Oh honey, this is wonderful. I started to smile, started to move forward, started to process the word pregnant and attach it to all the things we'd talked about, all the someday plans we'd made. Then Emma laughed. Not her regular laugh, something else. Something nervous and giddy and strange. Marcus doesn't know yet. And Mom, it's not his. The floor didn't drop out from under me. That's not what it feels like. The floor stayed exactly where it was. It was me who ceased to exist in any meaningful way. Me who became something less than solid, less than real. What? Catherine's voice had changed completely. Sharp now. Careful. It's Jake's, my boss. Emma's words were rushing out now, tumbling over each other like she'd been holding them in for too long and finally found release. We've been together for 6 months, since August, and we're in love, Mom. Really in love. He wants to marry me. We're going to be a family. Silence. I stood there in the hallway 10 feet from the kitchen holding Christmas presents, wearing a sweater Emma had given me last year with a reindeer on it. And I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there and let the words rearrange reality. 6 months as I'd been home in August. We'd celebrated our anniversary in August. 7 years. We'd gone to that restaurant by the lake, the expensive one, and she'd held my hand across the table and told me she was so lucky, that I was her person, that she couldn't imagine life without me. Emma. Catherine's voice was low now, almost a whisper. Emma, what are you saying? You and Marcus. Marcus is safe. Emma cut her off. And there was something dismissive in her tone that hurt worse than the confession itself. He's reliable and kind, and he'll probably take this well because he takes everything well. That's who he is. But Jake, Mom, Jake makes me feel alive. He's exciting and dangerous. And when I'm with him, I feel like I'm actually living instead of just existing in this comfortable little box Marcus built for us. Honey, her father's voice now. Richard, the man who'd shaken my hand at our wedding and told me he was gaining the son he'd always wanted. Honey, you need to think about what you're doing here. Marcus loves you. He's a good man. He's worked so hard. I know he's a good man. Emma's voice cracked. Don't you think I know that? Don't you think that makes this harder? But I can't live my whole life being grateful for someone being good to me. I want passion. I want spontaneity. I want someone who doesn't plan every moment of every day like it's a project to be managed. I managed projects for a living. I was good at it. I planned things because planning meant security, meant building something solid, meant creating a future worth living in. Apparently, that made me boring. And you're sure it's his? Catherine again? Practical even in crisis. I'm sure we haven't. Marcus and I haven't been intimate since July. He's been so busy with work and I've been with Jake and it just happened or stopped happening. Either way, this baby is Jake's. July. We hadn't made love since July and I hadn't even noticed. I'd been preoccupied with the Dubai contract, with planning my career advancement, with making sure we had enough saved for the house we were supposed to buy next spring. The house with the big backyard she'd wanted for kids. Our kids, not Jake's kids. I'm telling Marcus after Christmas. Emma's voice had steadied now, found its resolve. I'll wait until after the holidays. It would be cruel to ruin Christmas for him. Jake and I have already discussed it. He's getting divorced, too. His wife doesn't know yet, either. And we're going to find a place together. Start fresh. Do this right. Do this right. As if there was a right way to detonate someone's existence. I don't remember making the decision to leave. One moment I was standing there, the next I was walking backward slowly, carefully, like I was defusing a bomb by retreating from it. The packages were still in my arms. I don't know how I held on to them. My hands had stopped working in any way I recognized. The front door was still open. I'd left it open when I came in, too excited to bother closing it. I stepped back through it into the cold December night and pulled it shut with a quiet click that sounded like the closing of a casket. The snow had started falling harder. It collected on my shoulders as I stood there on the porch, staring at the wreaths Catherine had hung on the door, at the welcome mat that said, "Joy to all who enter." At the warm light spilling through the windows where my wife was planning her new life with another man's baby growing inside her. 6 months. The math was simple. She'd started sleeping with her boss 2 months after our anniversary. 2 months after looking me in the eyes and calling me her person. 1 month before I left for Dubai, had she been relieved when I got that assignment? Had she helped me pack, kissed me goodbye at the airport, and then driven straight to Jake's place to celebrate my absence? I walked to my car, put the presents in the trunk, sat in the driver's seat, and stared at the steering wheel while snow accumulated on the windshield, slowly erasing the view of the house where my marriage had just ended without anyone knowing it had happened. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Hey babe, almost ready for the party. So excited to see you. Dad's already drinking the good scotch. Save me." Heart emoji. I looked at those words for a long time. Tried to reconcile them with the woman in that kitchen. The one who just told her parents she was pregnant with her boss's baby. The one who'd called me safe and boring and compared our life to a box. I didn't respond. I started the car and drove. I don't remember much about the drive back to our house. Our house, the one we'd bought 3 years ago after saving for 5 years before that, the one where we'd painted the bedroom together, where we'd hosted dinner parties, where we'd made love on Sunday mornings and argued about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom and plan futures that apparently only I believed in. The house was dark when I pulled up, cold. I turned the heat down before leaving for Dubai to save money. Always saving money, always planning, always building toward a future that had just been cancelled. I sat in the driveway and called my best friend, David. He answered on the second ring, Christmas music and laughter in the background. "Marcus. Hey, man. Thought you weren't back until tomorrow. Everything okay?" "I need a lawyer," I said. "A divorce lawyer, the best one, you know." The background noise on his end cut off. I heard a door close. "What happened?" I told him. All of it. The early arrival, the kitchen conversation, the 6 months, the pregnancy, the plans she'd made to tell me after Christmas, like I was a child who needed to be protected from adult realities. David was quiet for a long time after I finished. "Then where are you now?" "Home." "Don't stay there. Pack a bag and go to a hotel right now, Marcus." "I'm serious." "Why?" "Because you need to think clearly and you can't do that in the house you shared with her. Because you need to not be there when she gets home and starts asking questions. Because you need space to process this before you do anything." He paused. "And because you need to document everything before she knows that you know." "Document." "Text messages, emails, phone records, bank statements, everything. If she's been having an affair for 6 months, there's evidence. You need to find it before she has a chance to delete it." The engineer in me understood this immediately. Evidence, data, facts that could be organized and analyzed and used to build a case. "I'll send you some names," David continued. "Lawyers who specialize in this kind of thing, but Marcus, listen to me. Do not confront her yet. Do not tell her you know. Not until you've talked to a lawyer and protected yourself." "Protected myself from what?" "She's the one who from everything. Financially, legally, emotionally. She's been planning this for months. You just found out tonight. She has a head start. You need to catch up before you make any moves. He was right. I knew he was right. But there was something in me that wanted to drive back to her parents' house, walk into that kitchen, and watch her face when she saw me. Watch her scramble for explanations. Watch her try to spin this into something that made sense. But I didn't, because David was right, and because underneath the shock and pain, something else was beginning to stir. Something cold and precise and methodical. She'd been planning this. She'd been careful. She'd calculated when to tell me, how to tell me. Had probably already discussed with Jake what the divorce would look like, how they'd manage the transition, what story they'd tell people. She'd turned our marriage into a project she was managing. I was good at managing projects, too, better than she knew. I packed a bag, clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the external hard drive where I backed up everything. I moved through the house we'd shared like a ghost, seeing it differently now. The photos on the walls, lies. The furniture we picked out together. Props in a play I didn't know was ending. The bed we'd slept in. A place where she'd faked intimacy while planning her exit. July, the last time we'd made love. I'd been too tired that night, jet-lagged from a previous work trip. But she'd initiated anyway. Been enthusiastic about it in a way that had surprised me. I thought we were reconnecting. I thought it meant something. Now I wondered if she'd been doing market research, comparing me to Jake, making sure she'd chosen correctly before committing to her choice. I found the folder where we kept important documents, marriage certificate, house deed, tax returns, insurance policies. I photographed all of it with my phone, uploaded everything to a secure cloud account she didn't have access to. Then I went to our home office and sat down at the computer. Emma and I shared a desktop computer for household things, bills, shopping, photos. She had her work laptop. I had mine. But this machine in the office was supposedly neutral territory. We both used it. We both had accounts. I knew her password. She'd never hidden it from me. Why would she? We were married. We trusted each other. I logged into her email. The engineering project in Dubai had taught me a lot about data analysis, how to sort through massive amounts of information to find patterns, how to filter noise from signal, how to build a picture from scattered pieces. I build a picture now. The affair had started in August, she'd said. I searched her emails for that time frame there, a hotel reservation. The Riverside Luxury Suites, August 15th, while I'd been home, while we'd been living our normal life. She told me she was having dinner with her college friend Sarah that night. Girls' night out. I'd ordered pizza and watched a documentary about infrastructure. She'd been at a hotel with Jake. I kept searching. Found expense reports she'd filed with her company, dinners charged to her corporate card, client entertainment, the report said. But the amounts were wrong for client dinners. Too expensive, too intimate, too entree, one dessert to share, bottles of wine that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. I found text messages synced to her cloud account. She deleted them from her phone, but hadn't realized they were backed up automatically. Jake, can't stop thinking about this afternoon. You're incredible. Emma, I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I don't regret it. Not even a little bit. Jake, when are you going to tell him? Emma, after the Dubai project, it's easier this way. He'll be gone and I can clear my head. That one hurt. She'd encouraged me to take the Dubai assignment. Had helped me prepare the proposal. Had told me it would be amazing for my career. I thought she was being supportive. She'd wanted me gone so she could be with Jake without the inconvenience of a husband underfoot. I documented everything. Screenshots, saved emails, exported text message histories. I created a folder on my external hard drive labeled Project Archive and filled it with evidence of my wife's 6-month betrayal. The engineer in me was calm now, focused. This was just data, just information to be collected and organized and analyzed. The husband in me was dying, but I didn't have time to feel that yet. It was almost midnight when I finished. I'd been sitting at that computer for 4 hours, watching my marriage dissolve into a timeline of teas and hotel reservations and deleted text messages. My phone had been buzzing the whole time. I'd muted it. Now I looked. 17 missed calls from Emma, 23 text messages. The messages told a story. Where are you? Party's starting. Babe, your parents called. They said you landed hours ago. Marcus, I'm getting worried. Are you okay? This isn't funny. Where are you? I'm going to call the police if you don't answer me. Please, just let me know you're safe. Almost laughed at that last one. Let her know I was safe. Like I was the one in danger here. Like I was the one who needed protecting. I texted back. Got delayed. Flight rescheduled. We'll be home tomorrow. Don't wait up. The response was immediate. Thank God I was so scared something happened. Love you so much. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Love you so much. Can't wait to see you. Words that meant nothing. Words she'd probably texted to Jake today, too. In between bites of Christmas cookies at her mother's house while telling her parents about their future family, I checked into a hotel. Not the Riverside luxury suites. I'd never be able to walk into that building without seeing my wife in bed with another man. But a business hotel near the airport. Clean and anonymous and empty. The room was beige. Everything was beige. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige bedspread. I sat on the edge of the beige bed and stared at the beige wall and tried to feel something other than the methodical calm that had carried me through the last 5 hours. The feelings came eventually. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, they came. I'd loved her. God, I'd loved her so completely. She was the first person I thought about when I woke up and the last person I thought about before sleep. She was the reason I worked so hard, saved so carefully, planned so meticulously. Everything I did with us in mind. Our future, our family, our life. And for 6 months while I'd been building that future in my head, she'd been dismantling it in reality. I cried first time in probably 15 years. Sat on that beige bed in that beige room and cried. Like something inside me had broken in a way that couldn't be fixed. But even while I cried, part of my brain was working, planning, calculating. She'd said she was going to tell me after Christmas. That gave me time. A week maybe. She'd want to ease into it probably. Pick the right moment. Stage the conversation. She was good at staging things. I was realizing good at managing perceptions. I could use that time. David had texted me 3 names. Lawyers. I looked them up on my phone, read reviews, studied their success rates in divorce cases. One name kept appearing in articles about complex divorces. Melissa Chen. She'd handled several high-profile cases involving infidelity and hidden assets. The reviews called her ruthless but fair and the lawyer you want on your side when things get ugly. Things were going to get ugly. I emailed her at 3 o'clock in the morning from my phone. Explained the situation briefly, professionally, like I was submitting a project proposal, attached some of the evidence I'd collected, asked for a consultation as soon as possible. She responded at 7 a.m. available this morning at 10 o'clock. Come to my office. Bring everything you have. I spent the hours until the meeting organizing the evidence. Created a timeline. Cross-referenced bank statements with Emma's calendar appointments. Found patterns I hadn't noticed before. She'd been taking half days at work every Friday for 3 months. Told me she was working from home those afternoons. But her work laptop's login records, I had access to our shared family iCloud account, which included her work device backups, showed she wasn't logging in on those afternoons. She was somewhere else with Jake, probably. While I'd been in Dubai thinking she was homework, she'd been spending 3-hour Friday afternoons doing God knows what with her boss. The bank statements showed regular cash withdrawals, $200 every Thursday. Cash she told me was for groceries and household expenses, but our actual grocery spending was all on credit cards. I could track it. The cash was going somewhere else. Gifts for Jake, maybe. Hotels they kept off the corporate card. I didn't know exactly, but the pattern was there. Regular, consistent, planned. She'd been so careful, so methodical. If I hadn't come home early, if I hadn't overheard that conversation, I might never have known. She would have told me after Christmas, yes, but she would have controlled the narrative, would have framed it as a sudden realization, a difficult choice, maybe even blamed our marriage problems on my traveling for work. Instead, I knew the truth, and I had evidence of the truth. That changed everything. Melissa Chen's office was in a downtown high-rise with a view of the river. Appropriate, I thought. Rivers cut through landscapes, carve new paths, reshape everything in their way. She was younger than I expected, mid-40s, maybe, wearing a gray suit that probably cost more than my car payment, with dark hair pulled back in a way that meant business. Mr. Harrison. She shook my hand firmly. Sit down. Show me what you have. I opened my laptop and walked her through everything. The timeline, the emails, the text messages, the bank statements, the hotel reservations, the suspicious Friday afternoons, the pregnancy that couldn't possibly be mine because we hadn't been intimate since July. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and studied me. You've been thorough, she said. I'm an engineer. Thoroughness is part of the job. Good. That's going to help. Here's where we stand. And she flipped to a new page on her pad. Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, which means the affair itself won't impact the divorce proceedings directly, but it will impact custody if she's trying to claim you're unfit. And it will definitely impact the financial settlement. Custody of what? The baby isn't mine. No, but you're married. Under Colorado law, you're presumed to be the father unless proven otherwise. She can claim the child is yours, and you'll need a paternity test to prove it isn't. I hadn't thought of that. The idea that I might be legally responsible for Jake's baby made something twist in my stomach. However, Melissa continued, the evidence you've gathered changes the game considerably. Considerably, she's been committing marital waste, spending marital funds on an affair. Those cash withdrawals, the hotel rooms, the dinners, all of that can be calculated and she can be required to reimburse the marital estate for that spending. How much are we talking about? She did some quick math on her pad. Conservative estimate based on what you've shown me. Probably $25,000 to $30,000 over 6 months. I thought about that. $30,000 of our money we'd saved for a house, for our future, spent on hotels and dinners and gifts for the man she'd been behind my back. There's more. Melissa said, you own a house together, have joint accounts. What does your employment situation look like? I make about $140,000 a year. She makes about 90 assets. The house bought it 3 years ago for $425,000. Probably worth $500,000 now. We've paid down about $75,000 of the mortgage, joint savings of about $80,000. My 401k has about $200,000. Her 401k has about $90,000. 2 cars, both paid off. Melissa nodded, writing it all down. So, roughly $650,000 in marital assets, not counting the retirement accounts, which are typically divided separately. In a standard divorce, you'd be looking at a roughly even split. But given the affair, the marital waste, and the fact that she's pregnant with another man's child, we can argue for a division more favorable to you. How favorable? 60-40 split is realistic. Maybe better depending on how aggressive you want to be and how much she wants to avoid a trial. I thought about Emma at her parents' house telling them about Jake, about the baby, about her exciting new future. I thought about her text messages, about her lies, about the 6 months she'd been building a new life while pretending to live our old one. How aggressive can we be? Melissa smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. As aggressive as you're willing to pay for, but here's my advice. Don't make this about revenge. Make it about protecting yourself and getting what you're legally entitled to. Revenge is expensive and emotionally exhausting. Justice is cleaner. What's the difference? Revenge is trying to hurt her because she hurt you. Justice is making sure she faces appropriate consequences for her actions while you move on with your life intact. I understood the distinction. I also understood that sometimes justice and revenge could look remarkably similar from the outside. I want justice, I said. And I want to make bar that when this is over, she understands exactly what she gave up. Melissa studied me for a moment, then nodded. We can work with that. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to act completely normal until after Christmas. You're going to pretend you don't know anything. You're going to be the loving husband. Can you do that? The idea made me sick, but I nodded. Good. While you're doing that, I'm going to file divorce papers. We'll serve her the day after Christmas before she has a chance to tell you her version of the story. This way, you control the narrative. She's going to know I found out somehow. Let her wonder. The point is, she doesn't get to manage this situation. She doesn't get to pick the time and place. She doesn't get to frame it her way. You do. I like that idea more than I should have. One more thing, Melissa said, I need you to get a paternity test done as soon as possible after the baby's born. We'll need documentation that you're not the father. Without that, you could be on the hook for child support. The baby isn't due until June. The divorce won't be final by then. No, but we can move quickly enough that the legal framework is in place. The key is documenting everything now while the evidence is fresh. She tapped the folder I brought with all my printed documentation. This is good work. Very detailed. But I need you to do one more thing. What? I need you to check your credit reports. All 3 bureaus. Make sure she hasn't opened any accounts in your name or taken out any loans you don't know about. If she's been planning this for 6 months, she might have been securing her financial position. I hadn't thought of that either. The idea that she might have been stealing from me in other ways made my hands clench into fists. I'll do it today. Good. And Marcus. Melissa's voice softened slightly. I know this is terrible. I know it feels like your world is ending, but you're doing the right things. You're being smart and careful, and that's going to protect you in the long run. A lot of people in your situation react emotionally and it costs them. You're not doing that. I'm not feeling very smart right now. That's because you're still processing. The shock is still fresh. But you came here instead of confronting her. You gathered evidence instead of destroying property. You're thinking strategically instead of acting impulsively. That takes intelligence and self-control. I didn't feel in control. I felt like I was barely holding together, but I nodded anyway. Go home, she said. Act normal. Be the husband she expects. Let her think everything is going according to her plan. And on December 26th, her world is going to change very suddenly. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt since hearing Emma's confession. A sense of purpose, a plan. I checked my credit reports that afternoon from my hotel room. Found something that made my jaw clench so hard my teeth hurt. She'd opened a credit card in both our names 3 months ago. October, the balance was $15,000. The charges were all at high-end stores. Nordstrom, Tiffany, Williams-Sonoma. She'd been buying things, expensive things, on a card I didn't know about, setting up her new life with Jake, decorating their future apartment, probably buying jewelry to celebrate their new beginning with my credit, with my financial responsibility. I forwarded the information to Melissa immediately. Her response was brief. This is good. This is very good. Keep looking. I kept looking. Found that she'd been transferring money from our joint savings to a separate account. I didn't have access to small amounts. 500 here, there. Nothing big enough to trigger alerts. But over 6 months, it added up to almost $20,000. She'd been planning this so carefully, so methodically. While I'd been in Dubai working 14-hour days in 110-degree heat, managing a project that was supposed to advance my career and secure our future, she'd been systematically preparing to leave me. The detail that hurt most was how she'd encouraged me to take that Dubai assignment. I'd been hesitant. 3 months away from home was a long time, but she'd been so supportive. Had told me it was an amazing opportunity. Had helped me prepare for the interview. Had celebrated with champagne when I got the offer. She'd wanted me gone. Had seen it as a gift, probably. 3 months to be with Jake without having to make excuses. 3 months to plan her exit strategy. 3 months to build her new life while I was paying for it from across the world. I wanted to scream, wanted to break things, wanted to drive to her office and tell everyone there what she'd done. Instead, I did what Melissa had told me to do. I went home. The house was empty when I arrived. Emma would be at work for another 2 hours. I walked through it like a stranger, seeing everything differently now. The kitchen where we'd cooked together. Had she been thinking about Jake while chopping vegetables beside me? Had she been comparing us, finding me wanting the living room where we'd watched movies on Friday nights? Had those Friday half-days been what she was really looking forward to? Time with him instead of time with me? The bedroom where we'd made love? Where we'd talked about having children someday, where she'd conceived someone else's child and never told me. I sat on the edge of our bed and looked at the framed photo on her nightstand. Us on our wedding day. She looked radiant. I looked happier than I'd ever been in my life. That man in the photo had no idea what was coming. Had no idea that the woman in white beside him would betray him so completely that 7 years later he'd be sitting here trying to figure out if anything had ever been real. My phone buzzed. Emma, home in 20. So excited to see you. Should I pick up dinner? I texted back like a loving husband would. I'll cook your favorite. See you soon. Her favorite was chicken piccata with angel hair pasta. I'd learned to make it for her birthday, our first year together. Had perfected it over 7 years of practice. I made it now. Moving through the motions mechanically. Chicken pounded thin, flour, butter, lemon, capers, pasta boiling, salad dressed, wine opened. The perfect welcome home dinner. I was setting the table when I heard her car in the driveway. She came through the door like a hurricane of excitement, dropped her purse, ran to me, threw her arms around my neck. You're home. You're really home. She was kissing my face, my neck, laughing. I missed you so much. So much. I held her, smelled her perfume, the one I'd given her for our anniversary. Felt her body against mine. The body that was carrying another man's child. I missed you too, I said. And the lie tasted like poison. She pulled back to look at me. Are you okay? You seem tired. Just jet lag, long flights. Well, you're home now, and I have so much to tell you about Christmas plans, and oh my God, you made chicken piccata. She'd seen the table. This is perfect. You're perfect. Perfect. Safe. Boring. The husband in the box. She was ready to discard. We sat down to dinner. She talked about her parents' Christmas party plans, about work, about a new coffee shop that had opened near her office. Normal conversation, easy conversation, the kind we'd had 1,000 times before. I watched her talk, studied her face, looked for signs of guilt, of deception, of the woman who told her mother I was safe and boring. She looked happy. Genuinely happy. Like there was nothing wrong at all. How was Dubai? She asked, twirling pasta on her and fork. Hot, complicated. We had some delays with the structural engineering, but we got it sorted out. That's my brilliant husband. Always sorting things out. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm so proud of you. I looked at her hand on mine, saw her wedding ring, the one that matched mine, the one that was supposed to mean something. Emma, I said carefully. Are you happy? She blinked. What? Of course I'm happy. Why would you ask that? Just I've been gone a lot, working a lot. I want to make sure we're okay. Her face did something complicated. For just a second, I saw something that might have been guilt. Then it was gone, replaced by her smile. We're great, she said firmly. We're absolutely great. And now you're home and we can have a perfect Christmas together. A perfect Christmas while she was pregnant with Jake's baby. While she was planning to tell me after the holidays that she was leaving me, while she was spending our money on her affair and hiding assets and opening credit cards in my name. Perfect. I made it through dinner, through dessert, through washing dishes together while she talked about getting a real tree this year instead of our usual artificial one. I made it through a movie on the couch, her head on my shoulder, her hand playing with my fingers like she always did. I made it through her suggesting that we go to bed early, her voice taking on that particular tone that meant she wanted to be intimate. I couldn't do that. I couldn't touch her like that knowing what I knew. I'm exhausted, I said. Jet lag is hitting hard. Can we just sleep? Of course, she kissed my cheek. Poor baby. You must be wiped out. We went to bed. She fell asleep quickly, curled against me like always. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling her breathe, counting down the hours until Christmas was over and Melissa could serve the divorce papers. 4 days. I had to act normal for 4 days. The next morning was Christmas Eve. Emma Mattel was off work, cheerful and energetic. She wanted to bake cookies for her parents' party. Wanted me to help. We stood in the kitchen together measuring flour and sugar. And I remembered all the other times we'd done this, the easy domesticity of it, the comfort of shared routines. Had any of it been real? Had she ever actually loved me, or had I just been a placeholder until someone more exciting came along? You're quiet, she said, bumping her hip against mine. What are you thinking about? Just tired still, I'd sighed. And thinking about the Dubai project. There are some things I need to sort out after the holidays. Work, work, work. She shook her head, smiling. You need to learn to turn it off sometimes. This from the woman who'd been her boss for 6 months. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. Papers ready. Process server confirmed for deck 269 AM. Stay strong. I deleted the message immediately. Who was that? Emma asked. David. Wishing me Merry Christmas. She nodded, already focused back on the cookies. We went to her parents' party that evening. I walked into that house where I'd heard the truth 2 nights ago and I smiled and shook hands and accepted Richard's hug and Catherine's kiss on the cheek. They knew. They knew about Jake and the baby and Emma's plans to leave me. And they were acting like everything was fine. Catherine pulled me aside at one point. Marcus, honey, I'm so glad you're home. Emma missed you terribly while you were gone. Did she though? Or did she just miss having the convenience of a husband around? I missed her too, I said, because what else could I say? She seems so happy lately, Catherine continued. Just glowing. I think she has some exciting news to share with you soon. Exciting news? The baby, the affair, the divorce. I'm looking forward to it, I said, and watched Catherine's face for any sign that she knew how that sentence could be interpreted. She just smiled and squeezed my arm. Richard cornered me later by the scotch, poured me a glass of the expensive stuff, the stuff I'd planned to bring him before my world imploded. Good to have you back, son. He said. Emma tells me the Dubai project was a success. It was challenging, but successful. That's the way with worthwhile things, isn't it? The challenging ones are usually the most rewarding. He sipped his drink. You and Emma have built something good together, something solid. Don't forget that. Was he trying to tell me something? Did he want me to fight for his daughter? To forgive her betrayal? To accept Jake's baby as my own? Or was he just making conversation, oblivious to the subtext I was reading into everything now? I couldn't tell. The not knowing was almost worse than the knowing. Emma found me an hour later. She'd had 2 glasses of wine. Wasn't she supposed to avoid alcohol while pregnant? And her cheeks were flushed. Having fun? She asked, sliding her arm through mine. Yeah, good party. I'm glad you're home for this. Christmas is better with you here. One more Christmas, one last holiday season as a married couple. Then she'd tell me her truth and I'd tell her I already knew and everything would detonate. We drove home that night in comfortable silence. She hummed along to Christmas carols on the radio. I focused on driving through the snow that had started falling again. Marcus, her voice was soft. Yeah, I love you. You know that, right? I looked at her. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. I know, I said. Did she love me? Could she love me and do what she'd done? Or was this guilt talking, last-minute doubts, cold feet about the new life she'd planned? I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore except that in less than 48 hours, this would all be over. Christmas Day was surreal. We opened presents in our living room like normal people. Like people whose marriage wasn't already dead. She gave me a watch. Expensive, beautiful. For all the time we'll spend together now that you're not traveling so much, she said. I gave her the bracelet from Dubai, watched her eyes light up when she opened it. It's gorgeous, she breathed. Marcus, this must have cost a fortune. It had. I'd wanted her to have something special, something that showed her how much I loved her. Now, I watched her put it on and thought about how she'd probably wear it on dates with Jake, how it would become part of her new life story. My ex-husband gave me this guilt gift, probably. He must have known somehow. We had brunch, watched Christmas movies. She fell asleep on the couch, and I covered her with a blanket and looked at her sleeping face. She looked peaceful, young. The woman I'd fallen in love with in that coffee shop 8 years ago, was still visible in her features. But that woman, if she'd ever really existed, was gone now, replaced by someone I didn't know. Someone who could lie with perfect ease. Someone who could plan a future with another man while sleeping in my bed every night. My phone buzzed. Melissa, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Be ready. I was ready. I'd been ready since the moment I heard Emma tell her mother about the pregnancy. That night, Emma wanted to make love. She initiated it carefully, sweetly, like she had 1,000 times before. I couldn't. I made up an excuse about still being jet-lagged, about being tired, about wanting to just hold her. She looked disappointed, but didn't push. We fell asleep with her back pressed against my chest, my arm around her waist. The last time we'd sleep this way, the last night of our marriage, even though she didn't know it yet, I woke up at 6 a.m. on December 26th, Emma was still asleep. I got up quietly, showered, dressed. By the time she woke up, I was on my second cup of coffee, sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. Morning, she said sleepily, coming into the kitchen in her robe. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. She poured herself coffee, decaf, I notice now because of the pregnancy, and sat across from me. What should we do today? We have the whole day off. We could drive up to the mountains, go for a hike, have lunch at that place you like. The doorbell rang. Emma looked at me surprised. Who would that be so early? I'll get it, I said, standing. I opened the door. A woman in a professional business suit stood there holding a manila envelope. Marcus Harrison, she asked. Yes, I have documents for Emma Harrison. Is she available? Emma appeared behind me. I'm Emma Harrison. The process server handed her the envelope. You've been served. Have a good day. She walked away just like that. Left us standing in the doorway with an envelope that contained the end of our marriage. Emma looked at the envelope, then at me. What is this? Open it. Her hands were shaking as she tore open the envelope, pulled out the papers, started reading. I watched her face change. Confusion first, then shock, then something like fear. This is Marcus. What is this? Divorce papers? I don't understand. I didn't say anything. Just stood there watching her try to process. This says you're filing for divorce. It says irreconcilable differences and marital waste. And she looked up at me eyes wide. Marcus, what the is going in? You're pregnant. I said calmly, with Jake's baby. You've been having an affair with your boss for 6 months. You were planning to tell me after Christmas, but I already know. Shouting, I've known since Christmas Eve. All the color drained from her face. How did you? I came home early, went to your parents' house, heard you tell your mother everything about Jake, about the baby, about how I'm safe and boring, and you want passion and excitement. She sat down hard on the couch, the papers scattered from her hands. You've been spending our money on your affair, I continued. You opened a credit card in both our names and ran up $15,000 in charges. You've been transferring money from our joint account to a secret account. You've been meeting him every Friday afternoon while telling me you were working from home. You've been planning this for months while I was in Dubai working to build our future. Marcus, her voice was barely a whisper. I have evidence. All of it. Text messages, emails, bank statements, hotel reservations. My lawyer has everything. So, you can't lie about this. You can't spin this into something where I'm the bad guy for traveling too much or working too hard. You did this. You chose this. And now you get to deal with the consequences. She was crying now, tears running down her face, shoulders shaking. I was going to tell you, I was going to explain. After Christmas, I know on your timeline, your way, but I don't care about your timeline anymore. This is my timeline now. Marcus, please. Can we just talk about this? Can we read the papers? I said, my lawyer will be in touch about dividing assets. I've already moved my stuff out to a hotel. I'll be back next week with movers for my furniture and personal items. Until then, you can stay here. I picked up my keys. I packed another bag last night after she fell asleep. It was waiting in my car. Where are you going? She stood up, panic in her voice. Now away from you, Marcus. Wait, please. I love you. I made a mistake, but I love you. We can work through this. I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the desperation in her face, the fear, the regret. Too late. All of it. Too late. You don't love me, I said quietly. You love the idea of me, the safety, the security, the life I built for us, but you don't love me. If you did, you wouldn't have spent 6 months your boss. You wouldn't have gotten pregnant with his baby. You wouldn't have called me boring and said you felt trapped in the life we made together. I didn't mean yes, you did. You meant every word. And the only reason you're sorry now is because I found out before you were ready. Because you lost control of the situation. Because I'm not reacting the way you expected. I walked to the door, turned back one more time. I hope Jake makes you happy, I said. I hope the passion and excitement are worth it. I hope when you're up at 3 a.m. with his baby, wondering how you're going to pay your bills because your lawyer fees and his divorce costs have drained both your accounts. I hope you'll remember how boring and safe I was and realize what you threw away. Marcus. I closed the door on whatever she was going to see. Got in my car, drove away. In my rear view mirror, I could see her standing in the doorway in her bathrobe, holding divorce papers, crying. I felt nothing. The nothing was almost worse than the pain. I drove to David's house. He opened the door before I could knock. Must have seen me pull up. It's done, he asked. It's done. He pulled me into a hug. I stood there stiffly, still feeling nothing, while my best friend tried to hold me together. Come on, he said finally. Sarah made breakfast. You should eat. I sat at their kitchen table while David's wife, Sarah, made me eggs and bacon and toast I couldn't taste. They were both being careful with me, like I might break. Maybe I was already broken. My phone started ringing. Emma. I declined the call. It rang again. Declined again. Declined. Text messages started flooding in. Please talk to me. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. I love you. Please don't do this. We can fix this. Marcus, please. But I turned my phone off. You okay? David asked carefully. I don't know what I am. Over the next few days, I learned to exist in a strange limbo. I stayed at David and Sarah's house. They gave me their guest room in space and didn't ask questions I couldn't answer. Emma tried everything. Phone calls I didn't answer. Texts I didn't read. She showed up at David's house twice. I didn't go to the door. She sent emails begging me to reconsider, to go to counseling to give her a chance to explain. There was nothing to explain. I'd heard the truth in her own words. Melissa moved fast. By New Year's Eve, we had a preliminary hearing scheduled. Emma had hired a lawyer, not as good as Melissa, not as experienced with this kind of case, but competent enough. The hearing was brutal. We sat on opposite sides of the courtroom like strangers. She looked terrible. Red eyes, weight loss, trembling hands. I looked calm. I was calm. The nothing had settled in permanently now. Her lawyer tried to argue that the credit card debt was for household expenses. Melissa produced receipts showing otherwise. Tiffany jewelry, Williams-Sonoma kitchen equipment, Nordstrom clothes in sizes I didn't wear. Her lawyer tried to argue that the money transfers were for savings. Melissa showed that the account was in Emma's name only, opened 3 months ago, clearly not marital savings. Her lawyer tried to suggest we should attempt reconciliation, that marriages could survive infidelity. Melissa calmly entered into evidence the text messages between Emma and Jake. Read them aloud in court. Messages about how they couldn't wait to be together, about how Emma was counting down the days until she could leave me, about how Jake was going to be such a good father to their baby. Emma was sobbing by the end of it. Her parents were there. They looked shell-shocked. The judge ordered a temporary division of assets that gave me access to all our joint accounts and froze Emma from making any large withdrawals or sales without court approval. Outside the courthouse, Richard caught up with me. Marcus, he said, I know you're hurting. I know this is terrible, But she's our daughter and we love her, and she told you about Jake. I said at Christmas Eve, you knew what she'd done and you stood in your house and told me how happy she was. You knew she was pregnant with another man's baby, and you said nothing. Richard's face crumpled. We were trying to protect her, to let her do this her own way. Protect her from what? The consequences of her choices. You raised her to think she could do whatever she wanted without accountability. Well, now she's learning different. I walked away. Catherine caught up with me in the parking lot. She made a mistake, Catherine said urgently. People make mistakes. Are you really going to throw away 7 years over a mistake? A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, I said. A mistake is saying something hurtful in an argument. A 6-month affair where she got pregnant with her boss's baby and stole $30,000 from our joint accounts isn't a mistake. It's a choice. Multiple choices. Hundreds of them. Every time she got in her car to drive to a hotel with him. Every time she withdrew cash to buy him gifts. Every time she lied to my face about where she'd been. Those weren't mistakes. Those were choices. She loves you. No, she doesn't. And you know what? I don't care anymore. Love isn't enough. Love doesn't excuse betrayal. Love doesn't mean I have to sacrifice my self-respect to make her feel better about her choices. I got in my car and drove away from Emma's mother, standing in the parking lot looking lost. January passed in a blur of legal meetings and document reviews. Melissa was as good as her reputation suggested. She built an airtight case for marital waste, for division of assets in my favor, for me being held harmless for the debts Emma had incurred. Emma's lawyer fought back, but weakly. The evidence was overwhelming. Every time they tried to paint me as an absent husband who'd driven Emma to an affair, Melissa produced emails and texts showing Emma encouraging me to take work trips, to focus on my career, to not worry about her. She can't have it both ways, Melissa argued in one hearing. She can't encourage him to advance his career and then blame his career for her infidelity. The judge agreed. In February, Jake finally appeared in the story. His wife had filed for divorce, too. She was apparently less forgiving than Emma had expected me to be. Jake's divorce was messy. He'd been married for 12 years, had 2 kids. His wife fought dirty, exposed the affair publicly, sent evidence to his employer. Jake got fired. Turned out having a sexual relationship with a subordinate violated his company's ethics policies. Emma, as the subordinate, kept her job, but was transferred to a different department. I heard all this through the gossip network. David's wife knew someone who worked at Emma's company. Apparently, Emma was a pariah there now, the woman who'd slept with her married boss and destroyed his family. I should have felt satisfaction. I felt nothing. Emma tried one more time to reach me in March. Showed up at the office where I'd returned to work after the Dubai project ended. Security called me. There's an Emma Harrison here to see you. Tell her I'm not available. She says it's urgent. I don't care. Tell her to contact my lawyer. But she was waiting by my car when I left that evening. 5 months pregnant now, showing clearly. Marcus, she said, please, just 5 minutes. I looked at her, saw the woman I'd loved, saw the stranger she'd become. 5 minutes, I said, I'm sorry. The words came out in a rush. I'm so sorry. I was stupid and selfish, and I threw away the best thing in my life for something that wasn't even real. Jake and I, we're not together anymore. His wife destroyed him in the divorce, and he blames me. And I realize now that what we had wasn't love. It was just excitement, escape. I was running from responsibility and I ruined everything, and I'm so sorry. I waited for her to finish. I want you back, she said. I know I don't deserve it. I know I hurt you. But I love you and I miss you and I want to fix this. Please, Marcus. Please, can we try? No. Please. You're pregnant with another man's baby. I said flatly. Even if I could forgive the affair, even if I could move past the laws and the theft and the betrayal, I can't be a father to Jake's child. I won't do that. It would be a constant reminder of what you did. Every time I looked at that baby, I'd see you with him. We could, after the baby is born, I could give it up for adoption. We could start fresh. The suggestion was so appalling, I actually stepped back. You'd give up your baby. You'd give away your child to make me more comfortable. What kind of person even suggests that? I just want you back. I'll do anything. No. The answer is no. It will always be no. I don't love you anymore, Emma. I don't even know if I ever really loved you or if I just loved the person I thought you were. But that person, if she ever existed, is gone. And I can't get her back. I got in my car and drove away, leaving her standing in the parking lot, pregnant and alone. The divorce was finalized in April. I got the house, 60% of our liquid assets, and she was ordered to reimburse the marital estate for the money she'd spent on the affair. My retirement account stayed mine, hers stayed hers. She got the debt from the credit card she'd opened, the furniture from the apartment she'd apparently been planning to move into with Jake before his life fell apart. The settlement was fair. Dojo was fair. Melissa said more than fair given the circumstances. I signed the papers in her office. Emma signed them at her lawyer's office. We never saw each other. On the day our divorce became final, I went back to the house. Our house, my house now. It felt empty, hollow. I walked through rooms full of memories that felt like they belonged to someone else. I stood in the bedroom where Emma had slept beside me for 7 years and tried to feel something. Still nothing. David told me I was depressed. Probably right. He wanted me to see a therapist. I went once. The therapist was kind and patient and asked me how I felt. Nothing, I said. I feel nothing. She said that was normal. That I'd experienced trauma and my emotions had shut down to protect me. That eventually I'd need to process what happened, to feel the feelings I was avoiding. I didn't go back. In May, I sold the house. Couldn't live there anymore. Every room was haunted by the ghost of a marriage I thought was real. I bought a condo downtown. Modern, clean, no memories. Emma had the baby in June. A girl. Jake wasn't at the hospital. They'd been broken up for 3 months by then. I heard she named the baby Sophia. I heard she was raising her alone. I heard her parents were helping, but not as much as she'd hoped. I heard all this secondhand and felt the same nothing I'd felt about everything else. In July, a year after the last time Emma and I had been intimate, I went on a date. David's wife set it up. A friend of a friend, nice woman, smart, attractive. We had dinner. She talked about her work, her hobbies, her life. I told her I had recently gotten divorced. How long were you married? She asked. 7 years. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? She had an affair, got pregnant with his baby, spent our money on him, lied about all of it for 6 months. The woman's eyes went wide. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. That's terrible. It's fine, I said, I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. I was nothing. And nothing wasn't fine. It was just nothing. There was no second date. 3 weeks after the divorce was final, I saw them at a restaurant. Emma and Jake together again, apparently. He was holding baby Sophia. Emma was smiling. They looked happy. I stood outside the restaurant window and watched them for a moment. Watched Jake bounce the baby while Emma laughed at something he said. They destroyed their marriages, lost their bonds, spent a fortune on divorce lawyers, become social pariahs in their professional and social circles, and there they were, happy. I waited for anger, for pain, for anything. Still nothing. I walked away. David found me later that night, drunk in my condo, staring at the wall. I saw them, I said. They're back together. Fuck them, David said fiercely. They're terrible people who deserve each other. They looked happy, so they're happy now. Give it 6 months. Give it a year, Dad. People who build relationships on betrayal always end up betraying each other eventually. Maybe he was right. Maybe they'd implode. Maybe they'd hurt each other the way they'd hurt their spouses. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they'd actually make it work. Maybe love built on ruins sometimes lasted. I didn't know. I didn't care. I can't feel anything. I told David. It's been 7 months and I can't feel anything. That's trauma, man. That's your brain protecting you. When does it stop? When do I get to feel something again? He didn't have an answer. In August, a year after Emma started her affair, I quit my job. The engineering firm was surprised. I was good at what I did. They offered me more money, better projects, flexible schedules. I turned it all down. I need a change, I said. What I meant was I need to burn down everything that reminds me of who I was when I thought I was happy. I moved to Seattle. New city, new job, new life. No one there knew I'd been married. No one knew about Emma or Jake or the Christmas Eve that destroyed everything. I was just Marcus, the quiet engineer who kept to himself. I worked. I existed. I felt nothing. In September, Emma reached out one last time. An email long and rambling and desperate. She told me Jake had left her, that he'd decided being a father was too hard, that he'd moved to another state to take a job that didn't require him to see her or Sophia. She told me she was struggling, that being a single mother is harder than she'd imagined, that her parents were disappointed in her, that her friends had mostly abandoned her. She told me she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd thrown away something real for something that had turned out to be an illusion. She asked if we could talk, if there was any chance, if I'd ever be able to forgive her. I read the email 3 times, then I deleted it, moved it to trash, emptied the trash, blocked her email address. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. She'd made her choices. I'd made mine. In October, David visited me in Seattle. "You look terrible," he said bluntly. "Thanks. I'm serious, Marcus. You're a ghost. You've lost weight. You're not sleeping. You're just existing. That's not living." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You haven't been fine since Christmas Eve last year. And I get it, man. I get that what she did was devastating, but you can't let her destroy the rest of your life. She took enough from you. Don't give her more." "I'm not giving her anything." "Yes, you are. You're giving her your future. You're giving her your ability to be happy. You're giving her power over you by refusing to move on." "I have moved on. I'm in a new city, new job, new life." "No," David said quietly. "You're in a new place, but you're still trapped in that moment you heard her tell her mother about Jake. You're still standing in that hallway holding Christmas presents, having your world end. You never left that moment, Marcus. You're still there." He was right. I knew he was right. But I didn't know how to leave. "How do I stop feeling nothing?" I asked. "You have to let yourself feel something. Anything. Even if it hurts, even if it's anger or pain or grief, you have to feel it to get through it." That night, alone in my Seattle condo, I finally let myself feel. I felt the rage first. Hot and overwhelming and terrifying. Rage at Emma for betraying me. Rage at Jake for his callousness. Rage at her parents for protecting Andwell. Rage at myself for not seeing the signs. Then the pain deep and aching and endless. The loss of 7 years. The loss of the future I'd planned. The loss of the person I'd been before I knew what betrayal felt like. Then the grief for the marriage I'd thought was real. For the love I'd believed in. For the man I'd been who'd thought he was building something permanent. I cried like I'd cried in that beige hotel room on Christmas Eve, but harder, deeper, louder. I broke things. Not many things. I wasn't destructive by nature. But I threw my coffee mug against the wall and watched it shatter and felt something like satisfaction. I screamed into a pillow so the neighbors wouldn't call the police. Screamed out all the words I'd never said to Emma. All the anger I'd kept controlled. All the pain I'd refused to acknowledge. When I was done, hours later, throat raw, eyes burning, I felt empty, but it was a different kind of empty than before. This empty had space in it, room for something new to grow. I started seeing the therapist David recommended. Went twice a week, talked about everything I'd been holding in. She asked me what I'd lost when Emma betrayed me. "Everything," I said. "No," she corrected gently. "You lost your marriage. You lost your trust in one person. You lost the future you'd planned, but you didn't lose everything. You didn't lose your intelligence, your kindness, your ability to love, your worth as a person. Those things are still intact." I didn't believe her at first, but slowly, week by week, session by session, I started to see her point. Emma's betrayal said something about her, not about me. Her choice to cheat wasn't a reflection of my value. It was a reflection of her character. The lies she told didn't make me stupid for believing them. They made her a liar. The future she destroyed wasn't my failure. It was her choice. In December, a year after the worst Christmas of my life, I flew back home for the holidays. David and Sarah hosted a party. I went. There were people there. I knew people who'd known Emma and me as a couple. People who'd heard about the divorce. They were awkward at first, careful with me, but I surprised them by being okay. Actually, okay. I laughed at jokes, had conversations, felt present in my own life for the first time in a year. "You seemed good," Sarah said quietly. "Really good." "I'm getting there," I told her. And it was true. I was getting there. Not to happiness yet, not to trust, not to being ready for another relationship, but to being okay with being alone. To being okay with not knowing what came next, to being okay. In January, 2 years after Emma started her affair, I met someone. Her name was Rachel. She was a landscape architect. We met at a professional conference where our fields overlapped. We talked for 3 hours over coffee, then dinner, then breakfast the next morning after talking all night. She was divorced, too. Different circumstances. Her ex had been an alcoholic who'd refused treatment, but she understood loss, understood betrayal, understood the work of rebuilding yourself. We started slowly, coffee dates, lunch meetings, walks through Seattle parks while she pointed out trees I'd never noticed. I told her about Emma, about Christmas Eve, about the year of nothings that followed. She listened without judgment. "Do you think you'll ever trust someone again?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Part of me thinks I will. Part of me thinks I'm too damaged. You're not damaged, she said firmly. You're wounded. There's a difference. Damage is permanent. Wounds heal. I wanted to believe her. We kept seeing each other, kept talking, kept building something careful and honest and real. One night, 6 months after we met, she asked me about scars. Everyone has scars, she said. Physical or emotional. They're proof that we survived something, that we healed. Do you have scars from what Emma did? Yes. Can I see them? I told her everything, not just the facts I'd shared before, but the feelings. The way I'd stood in that hallway and felt myself cease to exist. The year of nothing. The rage and pain and grief that had finally broken through. The slow hard work of becoming okay. She listened to all of it. Then she told me about her scars, about finding her husband passed out in their daughter's room, about the lies and broken promises, about choosing to leave even though she still loved him, about rebuilding her life as a single mother. We're both survivors, she said. Survivors of different things, but survivors nonetheless. And survivors get to choose what comes next. I kissed her that night. First time since Emma. It felt like stepping off a cliff and discovering I could fly. It wasn't perfect. I had moments of panic, moments where I wanted to run, moments where my scars itched. But Rachel was patient, understanding. She gave me space when I needed it and closeness when I could handle it. We built something together, slowly, carefully, honestly. 3 years after Christmas Eve, I married Rachel. It was a small ceremony. David was my best man. Rachel's daughter was her maid of honor. We didn't have a big reception. Didn't want the stress or the show, just us and the people we loved, making promises we intended to keep. I thought about Emma during the ceremony. Couldn't help it. My wedding tour had been huge. 300 people, open bar, live band, the works. This was different, quieter, more real. I meant these vows in a way I hadn't understood how to mean the first time. After the ceremony, David pulled me aside. You happy? He asked. Yeah, I said, and meant it. I really am. Good. You deserve it. I thought about that word deserve. What did any of us deserve? Emma had thought she deserved passion and excitement, had chosen it over stability and trust. Jake had thought he deserved a fresh start, had abandoned his children for it. I'd thought I deserved a faithful wife. Had discovered that what we think we deserve and what we get aren't always aligned. But now, standing here with Rachel's hand in mine, I thought maybe deserve was the wrong word. Maybe it wasn't about deserving. Maybe it was about choosing. Choosing to trust again even though I'd been betrayed. Choosing to love again even though I'd been hurt. Choosing to build something new instead of staying trapped in the wreckage of what had been destroyed. 4 years after Christmas Eve, Emma sent me a letter, not an email I could block, an actual letter, handwritten forwarded through Melissa because she was the only contact point Emma had. I almost threw it away without reading it, but Rachel saw it, asked what it was. Letter from my ex-wife. I said, are you going to read it? Should I? Rachel thought about it. That depends. Will reading it help you or hurt you? I didn't know. I'd spent 4 years building a life Emma wasn't part of. Did I really want to let her back in, even just through words on paper? But curiosity won. I opened the letter. It was long. Pages of small, careful handwriting. She told me Sophia was 3 now. Smart and funny and beautiful. She told me Jake had never paid child support, had disappeared completely. She told me her career had recovered, that she'd been promoted, was doing well professionally. She told me she was in therapy, had been for 2 years, was working on understanding why she'd made the choices she'd made. She told me she'd realized too late that what she'd called boring and safe had actually been love and commitment and partnership. She told me she was sorry again. Still, she told me she hoped I was happy. She told me she didn't expect a response, didn't expect anything from me, just wanted me to know that she understood finally what she destroyed. The letter ended with, you deserve better than what I gave you. I hope you found it. I read it twice. Felt not nothing, not rage, not pain. Something like pity maybe or closure. What did it say? Rachel asked. I summarized it for her. Are you going to respond? No, I said. I don't think there is anything to say. She apologized. I heard it. That's enough. Is it really? I thought about it. About the man I'd been on Christmas Eve 4 years ago. About the year of nothing that followed. About the slow, painful work of healing. Yeah. I said, it really is. I don't need anything from her. I don't hate her. I don't love her. I don't think about her unless reminded. She's just someone I used to know who made choices that hurt me. That's all she is now. Rachel kissed my cheek. That's growth. It was growth. Hard won and slow and painful, but growth nonetheless. I put the letter in a box in my closet. Didn't throw it away, but didn't keep it somewhere I'd see it either. Just archived it like any other document from a closed project. 5 years after Christmas Eve, I became a father. Rachel and I had a son. We named him Daniel. Holding him for the first time, I thought about everything that had happened to bring me to this moment. If Emma hadn't had an affair, I'd never have divorced her. If I'd never divorced her, I'd never have moved to Seattle. If I'd never moved to Seattle, I'd never have met Rachel. If I'd never met Rachel, Daniel wouldn't exist. It wasn't that Emma's betrayal was good. It wasn't that I was grateful for the pain, but it had led here, to this moment, to this life, to this family. What are you thinking? Rachel asked from the hospital bed. That life is strange, I said. That the worst thing that ever happened to me led to some of the best things. Are you glad it happened? No, but I'm glad where I ended up. She understood the distinction. Daniel grew. First steps, first words, first day of school. I was present for all of it. Not traveling for work, not missing moments because I was building a career. I'd learned that lesson, at least, that the building blocks of a life weren't job titles and bank accounts. They were moments, connections, people who mattered. 6 years after Christmas Eve, I ran into Richard, Emma's father. I was visiting David for the weekend, stopped at a coffee shop, and there he was. He looked older. Grayer, tired. Marcus, he said, surprised, uncertain. Richard? Awkward silence. I heard you remarried, he said finally. Have a son. I do. That's good. I'm glad you found happiness. I studied him, saw the regret in his face. How's Emma? I asked. She's managing. Sophia's 6 now. Smart kid. Emma's doing better. Therapy helped. She's with someone new. Nice guy, teacher. Stable. Stable. The thing she'd once called me dismissively. The thing she'd apparently learned to value. That's good, I said, and meant it. Marcus, Richard's voice dropped. I owe you an apology for that Christmas. For knowing what she was planning and not saying anything. For protecting her instead of being honest with you. That wasn't right. I considered his words. The apology I'd wanted desperately 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, now it felt less important. I appreciate that, I said. But it's okay. Really? What's done is done. Are you happy? He asked. Yeah, I said. I really am. And it was true. Not the simple, unexamined happiness of my marriage to Emma. Not the happiness of someone who didn't know that love could be faked and marriages could be lies, but the complicated earned happiness of someone who'd been broken and healed, who'd lost everything and built something new, who'd survived. 7 years after Christmas Eve, I told the story to my therapist. I still saw her occasionally, maintenance sessions, making sure I was processing things healthily. Do you think about her? The therapist asked. Sometimes, Wash, I admitted. Not often, but sometimes. What do you think about? I think about that night hearing her tell her mother about Jake. The way my whole world changed in 30 seconds. I paused. I think about how I could have confronted her right then, made a scene, let my anger out immediately. Do you wish you had? No. The way I did it, carefully, methodically, with evidence, that was better. It gave me control when I felt powerless. It made me feel less like a victim. Do you still feel like a victim? I thought about it. No, I feel like someone who experienced a terrible thing and survived it. That's different than being a victim. What would you say to someone going through what you went through? I'd say it gets better. Not quickly, not easily, but it gets better. I'd say that the nothing you feel is temporary, even though it doesn't feel that way. I'd say that you have to let yourself grieve, let yourself be angry, let yourself feel all the things you're avoiding. And I'd say that eventually on the other side of all that pain, there's a life worth living. Is that what you have? A life worth living? Yeah, I said I do. 8 years after Christmas Eve, I let it go. Not the memory that would always be there, but the weight of it, the significance. It became just a thing that happened. Not the defining moment of my life, not the event that everything else was measured against. Just a thing. Painful and difficult and life-changing, but not all-consuming. Rachel noticed. You're different lately, she said one evening while we were making dinner together. Different how? Lighter. Like you've put something down that you've been carrying. She was perceptive. I think I have. I said the Emma stuff. Yeah, that's good. She kissed me. You deserve to be free of it. There was that word again, deserve. Maybe I did deserve to be free of it. Maybe I deserve to be happy. Maybe I deserve this life I'd built with Rachel and Daniel. Or maybe deserve wasn't the point. Maybe the point was that I had chosen this, had chosen to heal, had chosen to trust again, had chosen to build something new instead of staying in the wreckage of what had been destroyed. 9 years after Christmas Eve, I forgot the anniversary. December 24th came and went, and I didn't think about it. Didn't remember until 2 days later when I was looking at my calendar for something else and saw the date. 9 years since I'd heard Emma confess to her mother. 9 years since my marriage ended, even though I didn't know it yet, and I'd forgotten. That felt like victory. 10 years after Christmas Eve, Emma reached out one more time. Another letter, shorter this time. I know I have no right to contact you. I know you've moved on and built a life, and I'm just a painful memory. But Sophia asks about you sometimes. She knows you were married to me before she was born. She doesn't understand why we're not together. I've told her we wanted different things, that we grew apart, all the euphemisms divorced people use. But she's 9 now and she's smart and she can tell there's more to the story. I don't want to lie to her the way I lied to you. So, I told her the truth, that I made terrible choices and hurt you deeply and that's why our marriage ended. She asked if you hate me. I told her I didn't know. Do you hate me? I'm not asking because I want your forgiveness or because I'm looking for closure. I'm asking because someday she might want to understand her own origin story. And I want to be able to tell her the truth about who we were and who we are now. I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. I hope that 10 years is enough distance for the pain to have faded. Emma, I read the letter to Rachel. Do you? She asked. Hate her? No, I said I don't think I ever really hated her. I was angry, hurt, betrayed, but hate? No. Are you going to respond? I think I will. Just to answer her question for Sophia's sake. I wrote back, kept it brief. Emma, I don't hate you. I did once or thought I did, but hate takes energy, and I'd rather spend that energy on the people I love. What you did hurt me deeply, but I've healed. I've moved on. I have a family I love and a life that makes me happy. I hope you have the same. For Sophia, your mother made choices that hurt people, but she's working to be better. That's all any of us can do. We make mistakes. We hurt people. And if we're lucky and willing to do the work, we become better than we were. Tell her that everyone's story is complicated. That people are more than the worst thing they have ever done and that it's possible to survive being hurt and build something good anyway. I wish you both well. Marcus, I mailed the letter and felt peace. Not forgiveness exactly. Emma hadn't earned that, and I wasn't sure she ever would, but peace, the kind that comes from putting down a burden you didn't realize you were still carrying. 11 years after Christmas Eve, Daniel asked me about my first marriage. He was 6. He'd seen wedding photos at David's house, pictures from when David was my best man the first time. Who's that lady? He asked, pointing at Emma. Rachel and I had agreed to be honest with him age appropriately. That's someone I was married to before your mom, I said. Why aren't you married to her now? Because we wanted different things and we weren't good for each other, so we stopped being married. Did it make you sad? Very sad for a while. Are you still sad? No, because now I have you and your mom and I'm very happy. That satisfied him. He went back to his coloring book. Rachel caught my eye, smiled. We'd done it. We'd built a family, a real one, based on honesty and trust and showing up. The kind of family I'd thought I had with Emma, but had only found with Rachel. 12 years after Christmas Eve, I stopped counting, stopped marking the anniversary, stopped measuring my life in distance from that moment, started measuring it in other ways. In Daniel's milestones, in years with Rachel, in projects completed and challenges overcome, Christmas Eve became just Christmas Eve again. A day for family and celebration and looking forward to the year ahead. Not a day haunted by ghosts of marriages past. The house where Emma's parents had lived was sold. They downsized to a condo somewhere in Florida. Richard had died 2 years earlier. Heart attack. I'd heard about it through mutual acquaintances. Felt sad in an abstract way. Catherine was still alive as far as I knew. I didn't keep track. Jake had apparently remarried. Had another kid. I didn't keep track of that either. Emma was still with the teacher. They'd gotten married. Sophia had a stepfather who showed up and loved her and chose her every day. I was glad for that. Genuinely glad. Every kid deserved that. I'd built a good life, a real life, a life worth living. And if someone asked me about my first marriage, I could tell them the story without pain, without anger, just facts, a timeline, something that happened to someone I used to be. The scars were still there, but they'd faded. Become part of the landscape of who I was instead of fresh wounds that defined me. Rachel understood that. She had her own scars. We compared them sometimes. Not competitively, just honestly. We're both survivors, she'd said once. She was right. We'd both survived different kinds of betrayal, different kinds of loss. And we'd both chosen to build something new instead of staying trapped in what had been destroyed. That was the real story. Not the betrayal, not the pain, not the Christmas Eve that changed everything. The story was what came after. The healing, the rebuilding, the choosing to trust again, the choosing to love again, the choosing to believe that what was broken could be mended into something different but still beautiful. 15 years after Christmas Eve, I received a wedding invitation. Sophia was getting married. She was 21, young but certain. The invitation was addressed to me and Rachel and Daniel. Emma had included a note. Sophia wants you there. She knows our history, all of it, and she still wants you at her wedding. She says you're part of her story, even though you were only in her mother's life for a short time. I understand if this is too much to ask. I understand if seeing me would be uncomfortable, but she asked me to invite you, so I am. No hard feelings either way. Emma, I showed the invitation to Rachel. Do you want to go? She asked. I don't know. It feels strange. I was married to her mother for 7 years, but I've never even met Sophia. I left before she was born. But she wants you there. That means something. It did mean something. I just wasn't sure what. Would you be okay with it? I asked Rachel. It's not about me being okay with it. It's about whether you want to go, whether it would be good for you or painful for you. I thought about it for days. Finally decided yes, I'd go. Not for Emma, not even for Sophia really, since I didn't know her, but for closure, for the final punctuation mark on a story that had been running without an ending for 15 years. The wedding was in spring, outdoors, beautiful weather. Sophia was lovely, looked like Emma, but with different energy, calmer, more grounded. Her fiancé was a doctor, kind eyes. The way he looked at her reminded me of how I used to look at Emma. I hoped he'd never have to learn what I learned. Emma saw me before the ceremony, approached carefully. Marcus, she said, thank you for coming. Of course. You look good. Happy. I am. You too. I am finally. She smiled uncertainly. This is Rachel. Yes, Rachel. This is Emma. They shook hands. 2 women who'd both been married to me. Meeting for the first time. It's nice to meet you, Rachel said graciously. You, too, and this must be Daniel. My son, 15 years old now, shook Emma's hand politely. Sophia's excited to meet you, Emma said to me. She's nervous about the wedding, but she really wanted you here. Why? Emma looked uncomfortable. She said her origin story includes pain and mistakes, but it also includes people choosing to be better. She said, you're part of that story, you choosing to move on instead of staying angry. That taught her something about resilience and forgiveness. I didn't know what to say to that. She's very wise, Rachel said. She is better than I was at her age, better than I deserved. Emma's voice caught. I have to go help her get ready. But Marcus, thank you for coming, for responding to my letters, for not hating me, even though you had every right to. I hope you're happy, Emma, I said and meant it. I hope you are, too. I am. The ceremony was beautiful. Sophia glowed. Her husband, new husband, looked at her like she was the only person in the world. During the reception, Sophia found me. Mr. Harrison. She said, thank you for coming. Call me Marcus and congratulations. I wanted to meet you. I know it's strange. You were married to my mom, but you left before I was born. But you're still part of my story. Your mother mentioned that. I'm not sure I understand. Sophia glanced at where Emma was standing with her teacher husband. My mom made terrible choices. She hurt you and Jake's family and herself, but she's worked hard to be better. To be someone I can be proud of. And part of what helped her become better was knowing that you moved on, that you built a good life, that you didn't let what she did destroy you. I almost let it. I admitted for a while. I almost let it, but you didn't. And that matters. It taught my mom that healing is possible. It taught me that we're not defined by our worst moments if we're willing to do the work to be better. This 21-year-old woman was teaching me things about my own story that I hadn't understood. You're very wise, I said. She laughed. My mom says that, too. I think I just had to grow up fast. Had to figure out how to make sense of a complicated origin story. For what it's worth, I said, I'm glad your mother found happiness. I'm glad you have a good stepfather. And I'm glad you're starting your own story with someone who loves you. Thank you. She said, that means more than you know. She hugged me, the stranger who was somehow connected to me through pain and healing and the strange ways lives intersect. Then she went back to her wedding, to her husband, to her future. And I went back to mine. Rachel took my hand. Daniel was talking to another teenager at the next table. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. I really am. And I was. The story had an ending now. Not a neat one, not a simple one, but an ending nonetheless. Emma had hurt me deeply, completely. But I'd survived more than survived. I'd healed. I'd grown. I'd built something real and good and lasting. The scars were still there, would always be there. But they didn't define me anymore. They were just part of my story. The painful chapters that had led to better ones. We left the wedding as the sun was setting. Drove home through spring twilight. What are you thinking? Rachel asked. That life is strange and painful and beautiful, I said. That the worst things can lead to the best things. That we survive by choosing to survive. Deep thoughts for a Saturday evening. I laughed. Maybe or maybe just the truth. Daniel fell asleep in the back seat. I watched him in the rear view mirror. My son, my family, my life, all of it built on ruins. All of it beautiful. Anyway, that's the thing about betrayal, about being broken, about having your world end in the space between one heartbeat and the next. You have choices. You can stay in that moment forever. Let it define you. Let it destroy you. Or you can survive it, heal from it, build something new from the pieces. I chose survival. I chose healing. I chose to believe that even the worst pain could be survived and transformed into something that made you stronger instead of bitter. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. It wasn't simple. But it was worth it. Every painful step, every moment of nothing, every scar earned in the process of becoming whole again would be worth it. Because now, 20 years after Christmas Eve, I can tell the story without bleeding. I can remember that hallway, those Christmas presents, those terrible words, and I can acknowledge that it happened without being destroyed by it again. The man who stood in that hallway is gone. The marriage he thought he had never existed. But I'm still here, scarred, but whole, wounded, but healed, different than I was, but maybe better for it. And that more than anything else, more than any revenge I could have taken or anger I could have held on to. That is the real ending to this story. Not Emma's confession, not the divorce, not even the wedding where I met the daughter I never had. The ending is this. I survived. And survival, it turns out, is its own kind of justice.